I'm Ryan Redford. I'm back. And as always, let's just start out with the topic. Men don't depend on anybody. You know, we have to always be ready for the fallout. We have to be prepared to do it by ourselves. We can't depend on a parent. As grown men, we're not a parent's problem. You know, if your parents have to help you, you were in a car accident, you're hurt, you fall on hard times, and, you need to use that as a stepping stool. There's no shame in that. I'm just saying men have to be ready to depend on absolutely nobody but themselves. You can't depend on a woman. You can't depend on Uncle Sam, the government to help you. You can't depend on friends. People outgrow each other. People have different goals. You can't depend on those friends. A lot of people, they think, oh, that's your ride or die, or, those people, they ain't gonna be there for you when times get bumpy. You think they are? 99% of them, they're not. They're not. A man has to be able to self-sustain. Always be ready for the fallout. People don't always get along forever. You could be with a woman and you outgrow her. She outgrows you. You don't see eye to eye. You have to be ready. A man needs to be able to pick up and leave at any moment's notice. He needs to have a backup plan. He has to always have enough where he can just pick up and leave at any moment's notice. You can't just be laid back in a comfort zone depending on a woman or her comfort. Women switch up quick. Women will switch up quick, real quick. Matter of fact, a lot of their friends and their moms and, they'll encourage them to leave a good man. You could be thinking everything's sweet. One day she gone. Women are encouraged to always level up, move up. Men are never taught that. Men are taught to settle, be, happy with what they got. Women will be the first ones to encourage other women. You got somebody who's got a little bit more money, leave him. You got any little come up, leave him. He's boring, leave him. Women will switch up quick. You can't depend on that woman. If you got a good woman, that's cool. There's nothing wrong with that. You got a good woman, there's nothing wrong with that. I'm just saying you have to always have a backup plan. Feelings change, emotions change, relationships change. Your feelings might change. What if your feelings change? You want to be stuck? You want to be stuck in some... Hey, what's up to all the people that joined? I appreciate and love you. Thank you for listening. I see you. I see you, Tess, Brandon. I see much love to all the people that joined. I'm sorry I just get on my little bit of my rants, Men, be prepared to not depend on anybody. If you have people you can depend on, that's awesome. That's great. Elizabeth, thank you for joining. FBI joined. Hi, how you doing? Uncle Sam, you can't depend on the government or anybody to swoop in and save you. You can't wait around. You always have to be prepared for change. Always, Destiny J, thank you for joining. Victoria, thank you for joining. Men, men these days, can you even build a fire? Can you chop wood? Can you do basic man things? Do you own a toolbox? Can you fix things around the house? Women don't want one of these men who can't even do the... Amanda, hey, what's up? How you doing? Thank you for joining. Thank you, everybody, for joining and listening. You know, men, can you do the most basic, essential things? You know, can you change a tire? You know, it's not always just AAA or waiting for other people to do things, or just because you have the money to pay people to do things. Man, you need to be able to do simple things on your own. Men, can you do we even iron anymore? Can you iron? Can you tie a tie? You know, there's there's a lot of things that are just being lost. Men can't even self sustain. Excuse me. You know, you just there's not a soul on this earth you should be sitting there thinking, you know, I can depend on this person. You just have to always have, and if you have that, great. But it could be gone in an instant. In an instant, it can be gone. Man, you just can't depend on any situation, any woman, any person, any sibling. You know, like I said, people that you've known your whole life. You know, they can switch it up on you once you really need them. You know, or start doing a little better than some of your friends or some of your family. You know, watch the jealousy come out, watch the hatred come out, watch the advice come out that's you know, disguised as jealousy. You know, you just, as a man, you have to be able to set everything aside, you know, and be able to pick up at any moment and be able to depend on nobody but yourself. You know, that's so important and so lost. We got, you know, men that can't even put together some shelves from IKEA. You know, women don't like that. Women don't like that. Women don't want a man who can't even do the most simple repairs around the house. Men, do you own a toolbox? Do you own a power drill? You know, do you have a screwdriver? Can you use these things? Can you set a screw in a wall? Just basic repairs. You know, men, you should be able to, you know, we have channels, we can look up instructions on how to fix anything. You know, everything's at the tip of our fingers. You know, we men have to be able to do more these days. You know, people say I'm hard on the women. I'm hard on the women too, because I think they have a little too much expectations, and it's not men's business to be paying women's bills if it's not your wife. And I think it's very outlandish that women would even be asking men to have their bills paid. You don't even know men like that. Hey, how you doing, Martha? How you doing, Erica? Cutie? Thank you all for joining. Thank you all for listening. Like I said, if I miss somebody, I just get on my little tandems and my little rants, you know. And you know, men, you know, don't trust anybody. Don't trust any situation. You know, that job, it could be gone tomorrow. They'll replace you so fast. They'll replace you so fast. They don't care about you know. Sergio, what's up? Grace McCready, what's up? Thank you for joining. Yeah, yeah, it is in the Bible. It is a man's responsibility to provide. Thank you for the info. You know, you're absolutely right. It's a man should be a protector, a provider. He should be, you know, a leader. It's all being lost. You know, equality goes out the door real quick when you treat a woman like a man. And women say they want a leader, but then they say they want equal. But you can't stand by somebody and that's leading. It doesn't even make sense. You know, there's no men. If a woman is treating you right, there's nothing wrong with treating her great. You know, but men, we don't be afraid to express that you know, you're going to take the reins on this situation or a situation. You know, don't be afraid to express your feelings. Don't be, just because a woman might talk over you or something, hey, take charge. You know, take charge. Be a leader. Be a leader that somebody can depend on, a protector, a leader, you know. But you also have to, a man has to be ready mentally up here to also, you know, lose everything. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? Like I said, even just the basic instincts. Can you build a fire? You know, can you do the most basic things to like heat your body, feed yourself? You know, these men today are just so soft. They're just so soft, and they don't, you know, it's women are attracted to men who lead and men who could do things and men who protect, you know. There's nothing wrong with it. And women, there's nothing wrong with being submissive to a man who leads and who leads you in a good direction and has got the weight of the world on his shoulders. There's nothing wrong with cherishing a man and being submissive to a man who's leading the whole or putting the whole family on his back. You know, men have the weight of the world on our shoulders. We don't need to come home to any mess. Thank you for everybody who's joined. Victoria, Mary, Peyton. I don't really want to talk about my shoes right now. I probably have a pair that's, I don't know, 15 years old. But anyway, I just want men to be out there and know, if you want a good woman, you have to bring good qualities as a man to the table. I'm all for a woman treating a man right these days, and it's almost like taboo for a woman to be submissive to a man. There's nothing wrong with being submissive to the right man or a good man. But men, we got to bring something solid to the table for a good woman to even want to be with. And that starts with yourself and focusing on yourself and building yourself. You got to be ready to absolutely depend on nobody. Red Baby said, amen. The problem nowadays, a lot of men want you to submit while not leading properly. I appreciate the comment. And I'd have to say to that, then you need to get that type of man out your life, because if he's not leading properly, then that's not in him. And it's not your job to train him to lead properly. That it is absolutely not your job to train a man to lead properly. So, and it's not your job to be submissive to a man who doesn't know how to lead or be the man. So, you could just nip that at the bud, and you shouldn't even be with or messing with a man who, because, a woman she can tell, in a very short amount of time if a man, Alex, how you doing? A woman can tell in a very short amount of time if a man has leadership qualities, or if this is the type of man that she wants to, follow through the flames of HELL with, get in the trenches with. She believes in his plan. She believes in his vision. That's gonna happen very quickly. And if you don't sense those qualities, women, you can sense a pushover. Women can sense a doormat type man. That's why so many men are so easily used these days. And, these cash sending apps are bumping, with women just using men because they can be pushed over. A man who's a true leader and, he's ready to depend on himself. He's not putting up with an attitude that asks him to send money all the time. She's nothing but a burden, a bill, all that type. That's showing he has low self-esteem and he's not a leader if he's even putting up with any of that. Cookie, how you doing? What are things boys do before leaving? I don't know what boys do because we're talking about grown men here. We're going to leave them boys aside. You shouldn't even be, Cookie, you shouldn't even be messing with boys. You should be alone too, working on yourself, not letting people into your aura who got that boyish quality when you should be with men. Men who know themselves, who have built themselves up, and you fit in nicely. Work, cooperate. Let's talk about that word, cooperation. It's so underused. That's besides being a man's piece. A man wants a woman who's ready to cooperate. And if a woman is good cooperating with him and they work well together, y'all can move mountains together. Yeah, well, look how you say, but the men you've been around act differently, don't act differently from a boy. Well, yeah, please don't mess with people who are going to jail and, people who are acting like boys and, not grown men and they don't know how to take care of themselves. That's all bad news. You have to be ready to be single before you mess with these type. You messing with street dudes, you ain't gonna find happiness. People who are on their way to jail, that's a terrible, terrible way to go. You messing with dudes who don't even value themselves. These are low value men if they're acting like little boys. And these are low value men if they're street dudes who are going to jail. Sometimes, just like I advise men, sometimes you just need to be alone. Be alone sometimes. Work on yourself. Work on yourself, Don't force yourself into any relationship with some bum people that don't align with your qualities. It's always bad news. you know uh no, I'm not Oriental. I'm black and Greek. So, you know men, you know our goal should be to take care of our parents. So, you know at the end of the day, you don't want to be depending on your parents or even being giving them just the they need to take care of you or you need them. That shouldn't even be in the equation. Your goal should be to be building up and to be taking care of them. Like I said, um thanks, Alex White. But you men, we always, always, always have to be prepared for the fallout of anything. Lord knows we don't hope that marriage or that relationship or, that friendship or, it could be a relationship with a sibling. You can't, you got to always be prepared for a fallout, with any relationship you have in your life. You got to be ready to have enough saved up, your finances in order where you can pick up a bag and just go. Just do your own thing. If you got to go ghost for a little while, whatever, you just got to be able to be on a level like the most thing you should have is enough saved to do yourself. To be able to, if this doesn't work out, this job doesn't work out, this whatever, that job shouldn't be your whole who you are, or you depend on it, because when you depend on a job and then you just become a worker to it. I don't want to use words on here that are gonna get me banned, but you become servitude to that job. You can't leave. You're gonna lose your house. You're gonna lose your car. You don't want to be in that situation. You need to have a backup plan. You shouldn't even be out there driving a car that if you lose your job, it can get taken away. You need foundation in your life. You know, you need solidness, and that starts with you working on yourself as a man that doesn't need anybody. Like I said, people that love you in your life, that's a blessing. That is an absolute blessing, but you can't depend on it. You can't depend on that woman. She'll switch up fast on you. Friends will switch up fast on you. You know, as you get older, you'll have less and less and less friends. So thank you for joining. Thank you for listening. Each and every person who's joined and listened and even paid attention. You know, I hope I can plant a seed in your head of self-respect, or, you know, a seed of, you know, just any type of knowledge that helps you to be a better person in any type of way, man or woman. Thank you for listening. You know, I'll get back to that job. That job will replace you so quick. You have to have multiple streams in income, multiple streams, as many as you possibly can. You can't just depend on one stream of income these days. You just can't. You know, and that job, like I said, it could be here one day, gone the next day. You know, they could replace you. They could downsize. They could go out of business. You know, you're not that important to any of these corporations. I hope you realize that. You know, every single one of these jobs has a stack of applicants that'll replace you if you pass away. You know, thank you, Emily. Thank you for joining. You know, men, you have to be self-sufficient. And I see it just slipping away. Men just aren't self-sufficient these days. You know, they can't even do the most basic things. You know, can you change a tire? Do you have your woman sitting in the car for 2 hours while AAA comes or somebody comes to help you? You know, you have to be able to change a tire. You have to be able to put the most basic things together. You know, you have a child and the crib comes in the mail. You know, can you put it together even? Yes, you can pay the extra now for people to come and do all this crap for you, but is that manly? Are you really a man? You know, I don't care if I can afford to put pay people to put basic things together. I don't want them to. You know, I don't want other grown men to come into my house and have to do things I should be able to do. No, I don't even see how women would even find that attractive. That the man can't even do the most basic, simple repairs. Come on now. Men, we got to do better too. You know, I'm hard on the women with this handout, always asking for bills to be paid in their bios and all the craziness, and so quick to ask men they hardly even know to pay things that is sure not the man's obligation. But men, we got to bring something to the table. You know, we got to bring leadership. You know, we got to give these women something to respect. I see a lot of men that just, I don't know, Cookie on here earlier, she said there's nothing but a bunch of little boys out here. And, you know, I can't even argue with her. Because when I look around, I see a bunch of men who can barely do anything, a bunch of men who whine and complain. No women want a complainer. Nah, they want somebody who's going to solve problems, get things done, lead them to a better level of life. They don't want, you know, thank you for joining. You know, thank everybody for joining. Who's joined. If I miss you, I'm sorry. I just get in on these rants and these tandems, and I get into what I'm saying because I believe in what I'm saying. And I don't want love just to be a transaction. I say it all the time. I don't want love to just turn into a transaction where women's measure of how much a man loves them is how much he spends. I'm so tired of that. I'm so tired of it. It's teaching our daughters that, you know, to measure love in dollars. You know, I'm not saying a man should be broke or you should fall in love with a broke man that doesn't have his together. But there's nothing wrong with falling in love with a man with a plan. There's nothing wrong with falling in love with a man with a plan. And, you know, you believe in his plan and you see his vision, you know, and you're sparked by his charisma, you know, his moxie. You know, there's nothing wrong with that. You know, there's absolute, Michelle, how you doing? There's absolutely nothing wrong with being sweet, kind, submissive, and nice to a woman who, to a man where you believe in his plan. Women, you know, let's bring back supporting men. Let's bring back having men's back. You know, I'm not talking about bummy dudes. I'm not talking about bummy dudes who sit around playing PlayStation and you let this unemployed bum live at your house. I'm not talking about those type of men. I'm talking about men who are on their hustle, who are on their job, who know what their plan is in life is, they have a mission, you know, and your behavior as a woman is not going to knock that man off his mission, you know. You know, women love a man who says no and has boundaries and respects himself. You know, no woman respects a pushover, a doormat, a man that, you know, she can have a funky attitude with and he just puts up with it and he just lets, well, King of Football ATL, thank you, bro. I appreciate that. I'm just out here just sharing, you know. So, you know, like I'm saying, man, we gotta, not only do we have to be self-sufficient, you can't expect a good woman and you don't even bring anything to the table. You know, women, you know, you gotta have what we want you to bring to the table is often a lot different than what you think. You know, men are very simple creatures. We just want quiet, sweetness, you know, soft, you know, cooperation, you know, food in our bellies, you know, all that arguing and talking over us and rolling your eyes. It's such a turnoff. You think that chip on your shoulder is cute or that's boss energy? That we don't want any part of that. A man that values and respects himself, you know, that boss energy, it just looks like B energy. You know, no man wants to come home to arguing and going back and forth. Men, you can't be your best version of yourself always arguing with people. Chris, Cherisha, how you doing? Steve, how you doing? He said is when you cheat. Well, you know, I'm gonna leave that one alone because it is what it is. Because I don't know, I don't even think you should get to the point of cheating, because if a woman is doing all that arguing and stuff, you just shouldn't be with her. Why be with her? Why even have her around, you know? All she's going to do is drag you down. If a woman's dragging you down mentally with all that arguing and going back and forth and she's got to be always right, I don't care how pretty she is or what she can do in the sack. You don't need that in your life. A man who values himself is going to have a woman that speaks to him with respect, you know, and she's going to get treated with respect for being respectful to him. It's a two-way street. But all that masculine, loud, mean energy is, no man that respects himself is going to be putting up with that. Absolutely not. You know, I don't want that type of energy in my aura. I don't want it in my whole vibe. I don't want it in my whole day, period. I got goals. You know, my head's always on mission mode. I can't be going back and forth and arguing with some woman about some little BS. I just can't. I got things to do. You know, My favorite saying is, if she's not helping you, she's hurting you. And that can go both ways. But like I said, there's many shows and podcasts and influencers and TV shows dedicated to the women stuff. I'm talking about the men stuff here. So, you know, men, don't settle. Don't settle. You know, don't be afraid to be alone and work on yourself. I always say it, go to the gym, put down the bottle, drink water, work on your multiple streams of income. What am I talking about? I'm talking about men need to be ready to never depend on anybody but themselves at any given time. Yes, it's nice to have people in your life that love you. Everything you have and depend on can be gone, and yet the rug can be yanked out from under you at any moment. And as a man, you need to be ready to respond. You need to be ready for the fallout. They have all kinds of women's shelters and homes for women and family shelters for women. You know what the shelter is for men? Jail. The shelter for men is prison. We don't have half the avenues and charities, and everybody tells a man he needs to just man up and pull himself up. A man needs to man up. Nobody tells a woman who falls on hard times and she got hurt, she's living in her car with her kids. Nobody tells her, oh, you need to woman up. You need to woman up. No, that's for men. So let's just drop all that equality stuff right here at the door, and let's be having honest conversation. You know, who hurt me? I'm just speaking facts. User 219. Lots of things have hurt me, but but I'm human. I'm human. I see what's going around. I see a lot of young men who have been taught that I see a lot of young men who are even being taught that how much they love a woman is how much they can spend on her. We have countless songs about it. We have just a whole culture now of how much you spend on that woman is how much you love her. Can we get back to basics where people actually enjoy each other's company, kindness, love, a real connection besides how much the man can spend. Sorry, maybe you say being angry about this stuff is a waste of time. I'm not angry at all. I'm just encouraging men to respect themselves, and you don't respect yourself if you're just sitting there. The only connection you have with a woman is sending her money, and you actually think she likes you. Sorry, you're a sucker. She doesn't like you. I'm not. I have no stake in this fight. I have a great woman that has my back 1,000%. I'm talking about these young men out here that I see absolutely dead up, lost. You say, why am I bitter? Because I don't think men should be paying for things that they're not obligated. Mr. or FLDJ, or whoever you are, there's nothing bitter about encouraging men to be the best version of themselves. People encourage women to be the best version of themselves all day, every day. People encourage women not to settle all day, every day. No, I grew up in Nashville, Teflon. So women are encouraged not to settle, not all there, to level up, to not put up with this. Why is it bitter for me to tell men not to put up with garbage? Why is it bitter for me to tell men not to settle, not to put up with garbage, to be the best version of themselves. I tell men not to drink, to go to the gym, to work on their streams of income in themselves. I don't think there's anything bitter about that. I actually think quite the contrary. It's bitter for you to even attack that situation. Especially, we have so many avenues complimenting women on just such mediocrity these days. So, I don't know why I can't encourage men the same way that women encourage women all day, every day. So, thank you for tuning in. Thank you, everybody, for listening. If I was bitter about anything, I am bitter about a culture of men being used. That's not cool. Men deserve to be loved too. They deserve to. Men are not just a paycheck. They're not just a lottery ticket. Men deserve, you know, men deserve all the things that women will say they deserve in a heartbeat. Matter of fact, women have it plainly stated in a lot of their dating bios right now. Not only what they deserve, they have it what you have to do to even contact them. You have to be ready to pay their rent, and if it's this much, pay their lights, and it's this much, pay their hair, their lashes, their wax. I mean, they have lists a mile long of the thing a man has to pay for in his bio, but I see very little bios anymore that say kindness or, he treats me right. It's all monetary transaction. Bree, it is kind of sad. It's very sad, and I'm glad I see a woman who agrees with me that it's sad because, like I said, men, we don't want to just be used. We deserve companionship. And I'm not talking about you should be companion or buddying up to some bum dude or a loser guy or a guy who has no plan or has no agenda. Stay away from those type of men, ladies, for the best of yourself. But it is absolutely sad, Bree, that where relationships are at now, that love is measured in money. How many opportunities are women and men missing out on true love or true companionship or somebody that they really could lock in with or, spend a lot of time with, because they're too much worried about how much the other person can do for them. It's just so transactional, and we have a very broad word. I say it all the time. I don't say it on the air, but it's a very broad term. It's known worldwide for the type of women you got to pay for their services and time. And that's becoming the norm, and it's sad, and I don't want to talk to our daughters. Bree, you say, do I believe in 50-50? Absolutely, I believe in 50-50. I do believe in 50-50. If both parents are willing and both parents are fit, absolutely. I had a friend of mine who, it was really sad. He had 50-50 down the line. I mean, they literally split the week down to the very second. And like they would drop off the kids where they had exactly 50% of the kids each parent, and the man was still paying her like $1,200 a month in child support. I don't understand how they were both, getting the exact same amount of time, but the man was still being ordered to pay her a bunch of child support. So is my faith in 50? I believe in 50-50, but do I have faith in it always being a true 50-50? Tony Soprano, I love the name. Yeah, he said tricking is modern day prostitution, and I would absolutely agree. And I think one of the saddest things that I was touching upon with Bree is that, we're teaching our daughters this. This is what we're teaching our daughters, and then we have a bunch of women who are living like this, teaching our sons that that's how it is. So it's just all bad for the children. It is all, do these children even stand a chance of, you know, where's even the connection? Are our kids even going to be able to develop a connection with another person without money being exchanged? Because what Tony said is 1,000% correct. If you have to pay for a woman's hair to be done, or you have to pay for, you know, her nails and her lashes just for her to go out to eat with you, you're in that boat. You're in that boat. If a woman is sitting there saying she has to be sent this somewhat amount of money or a certain amount of money, and you have to take care of these type of things before you're allowed to see her or hang out with her. Well, like I said, there's a very, very well-known term for the type of women you have to pay for their services and their time. I don't want to go on here name calling or get flagged or anything like that, but is this really what we're teaching our daughters now? Is this really where we're going? We're teaching our daughters that, a man's love is just totally determined by what he can spend on the woman? Because there's a lot of wealthy men that can spend the world on a woman, but they ain't got no love for her. They totally treat them like objects. I see it all the time. Wealth and how much a man, does that mean just a regular guy who works at, AutoZone? He's incapable of loving a woman? Is that where we're at now? A man who, just a construction worker, a guy who lays asphalt, he's incapable of loving a woman as much as a man who makes multiple millions, just because he can't spoil her like she's one of the dang Kardashians or something. So he doesn't truly love her. There's only a very small percent of the population of men that make multiple millions. And there's a freaking line around the dang earth of women thinking that they're going to capture these 1-2% of men who just make these multiple millions and just give them this life of luxury vacation, luxury cars, and luxury houses. Get real. There's nothing wrong with a man who treats you right, who's just a regular guy. Regular guys are getting railroaded these days. Just railroaded. Hardworking, good men are getting treated like garbage. Just like garbage, because they can't provide that 6-figure, that 7-figure lifestyle. A lot of these women that are asking for this 7-figure, 6-figure lifestyle, they ain't even got nothing to offer but what they have between their legs. They can't cook, they can't clean, they got bad attitudes, they're moody, they're disrespectful, but they think a high-value $1 million man is supposed to swoop in and save them. It doesn't work like that. And a man who values and respects himself and has built himself up, he doesn't want that mess in his life. He doesn't. He sure doesn't. Bree said, you're right. This guy I like told me as a man he has to pay all the time, and that made you feel bad. Well, I'm a traditional man. I think the man should, if he asks a woman out, he should pay. But that doesn't mean if they start, seeing each other on a regular basis or having somewhat of a relationship, she shouldn't start reciprocating. Absolutely. Good for you, Bree. We need more women who think like that, because there's not enough. There's nothing wrong with reciprocating to a man who does good by you. And men, if you do ask a woman out, maybe I'm traditional, maybe I'm old school, but you should, if you ask her out, you should pay for the meal. You should pay for the date. You shouldn't be paying for all the extras. Absolutely not. It is not your obligation to pay for a woman's hair and nails and lashes so she can go on the date. If she needs you to pay for all that, she doesn't have her life together anyway, and you shouldn't even be dating her. And that's just a fact. And if she even has the audacity to ask you for all that stuff, well, that should be a red flag if you hardly know her or you just met her anyway, and you should run. Block her and run. Get out of there. Kira or Kyra, sorry if I pronounced it wrong. See, I have glasses, glance down. The writing's pretty small, but thank you for joining. Thank you for listening. You know, so let's just loop right back around to the topic. Men, come on now. Let's give these women something to respect. I'm always preaching that women need to be more respectful to men and appreciate men, but you got to give them something solid. And when you're self-sufficient and you don't need a woman, women sense that. They want to fit into your life. Do you have any followers that like reading books? I don't know. I like reading books. I just read John Singleton's The Seagull. That was I've heard a lot about it for a long time. Thank you. I like. You said you like my sweater. On sale at Macy's after Christmas in their cashmere department. Anyway, let's get back to the subject. Men, let's thank you for all the compliments. Thank you for all the people who joined. Thank you for all the people who listened or are listening. I'm just, give me a like, give me a follow if you don't mind. Even if you don't give me a like or don't give me a follow, I just appreciate being able to plant even the littlest seed in anybody's head just about respecting themselves, and that you don't have to be a pushover to the pressures of society and what they're trying to tell us relationships have to be. I still do believe in love. I still believe in companionship. I believe in people cooperating. I believe in people building together. I don't believe in leeches jumping onto a man who already has everything and has his together and just thinking she's going to be along for the spending spree. Absolutely not. I don't believe in all that. I don't believe in all these cash sending apps. I don't believe in, paying for people's bills and sending people money that you're not obligated to. That should be money that you're working on yourself. That should be all money that you're investing in yourself, working on your multiple streams of income. Being the type of man that that doesn't have to depend on anybody. That should be all of our goal. All of our men's goals should be to be self-employed. You don't never want to call another man boss. If you have a job and you grinding it out on a job, lots of respect for that. I respect anybody's hustle, but our goal at the end of the day, those jobs should just be stepping stools to our real goals where we're the boss of ourselves. But even at that job, you never call another man boss. You can call him the manager of this establishment, the owner, the supervisor, but you don't never call another man boss. Ever. And definitely not in front of your woman. Never, never, never. That's weak energy. We don't get down like that. We don't call the next man boss. Ever. So, men, you got to be prepared, just to handle business by yourself. You got to be ready for that rug to be pulled out under you. Do I think you should dwell on the negative and manifest the negative and dwell on what bad can happen? No, that's not what I'm talking about at all. But you just need to have common sense. You need to have common sense that, if the floor falls out from under me, I can maintain. You got to have a parachute, a savings, a backup plan, whatever you want to call it. But a man at any moment's notice with the ring of a phone with some type of news should be able to move on to the next. I'm not saying it's going to be easy, but you got to be willing to make that. You can't be afraid to, and you have to be prepared. You got to always be prepared for change. Women will switch up on you quick. You might switch up your feelings for her. You know, she might switch up her feelings for you. It happens all the time. You can't depend on the opposite sex to just always be there. You know, women are encouraged all the time to switch up on men. You know, women could have a man who makes 10 million a year, busting his behind, going to work every day, and he leaves that woman at home, and she'll get a pass for cheating or leaving just because she's bored, just because he's not home enough. And he's out. The reason he's out is because he's busting his hump for them to have a better life. But she'll still get a pass for leaving because he's bored. So men, don't think that woman won't leave you. You know, women think they're upgrading, or they got some bum friends that are encouraging them, that's encouraging them to, you know, make some bad decisions. You know, women that got a bunch of single friends, they love to encourage their friends to make bad decisions. You know, misery loves company. You know, women's worst enemy is women. You know, nobody's as evil towards women as women. You know, so, you know, they'll sit there and make their friends gas their head up into thinking that they should leave you no matter how good you are to them. That's why I actually encourage men, if you have a good woman, I don't want a good woman hanging out with a bunch of single friends. No, I don't think that's ever a good thing. You know, you got a good woman and she's got a bunch of single friends in her ear 24/7. You don't think those miserable birds want her to be single and miserable like them? Of course they do. You know, of course they do. Man, you know, she can switch up on you. Your job can switch up on you. Family can switch up on you. You know, you got to be able to I cannot speak tonight. I'm sorry. I quit with that. I'm just going to give up because I sound silly. The word I'm looking for is oh man. This is going to have to go on my blooper reel because I sound like an idiot. But you don't have, you know, you can't depend on Uncle Sam. You can't depend on siblings, friends. It all, you know, you just have to be your own backbone. You have to be ready for, you know, if things hit the fan, what are you going to do? Are you going to be able to, are you going to have to run back home to your parents? Are you going to be able to, you know, take it on the chin and handle it? You know, men, we got to always be able to take it on the chin. It's not, I'm not sitting here saying it feels good. You know, a lot of things hurt. Men have feelings too. Another thing that's totally lost, you know, men have feelings too. You know, men don't like to be used, you know. Men have feelings too. When it's constantly a relationship is just, you know, give. You know, a man starts to feel used, you know. A relationship should be give and take. Not just what's up, Gabe? I don't even know who that is or what you're talking about. My thoughts on. But, you know, men get tired of being asked to just give. You know, there needs to be, you know, both. You know, men are supposed to just suck it up. We're just supposed to, you know, man up all the time. You know, sorry when a lot of times men, you know, we have not just the burden of the world, we have to fight to even see our kids that we love more than anything. You know, I'm not just talking about financial here. And men, when I say you have to be ready to depend on nobody but yourself. You know, a lot of times I'm talking about you and your children. So we got to man up. We got to step up. We got to do all these things. And a lot of times we got to be doing it for our children. And there's just so few avenues of help for men. Because men are expected to just man up, do it all themselves, But it's not that easy. Look at all these people that are homeless, that are struggling with addiction. A lot of these people, they didn't just wake up and say, hey, this is how I want to live. A lot of people are using addiction to fight demons. A lot of people are using alcohol, drugs, and, a lot of things to fight demons because, it tears men to pieces that we can't see our kids. We have to fight to see our kids. 70% of divorces are initiated by women. So that kind of tells me a lot more men are really truly invested in a long-term marriage. 70% of divorces are initiated by women. A lot of women think being independent is a flex these days. So men, that should let you know right then. Just society tells these women that, being independent is a flex. It's something to be proud about, something to be bragging about. I don't need a man. Cindy, thank you for joining. Thank you for anybody who's joined and listened, or, I appreciate it. It's not a flex to be so independent you're going to die alone. It's not a flex, women, to be so independent you can't even let a nice guy in because he doesn't make 6 figures or more. You know what it is? A flex is having somebody who cares about you, having somebody who's nice to you. Women, I like I said, I see in the bios, I see all this transactional love where men got to pay for women's time and everything. And, just where is the companionship? Where did even the love go? Where did it's not a flex to be so independent that you're, because years go by fast. All that, men aren't going around bragging about their independence. I'm an independent man. I can handle myself. I'm an independent man. I don't need anybody. We don't say that because it's expected. We're grown men and it's expected of us to be independent and know how to operate independent. But we want companionship. We want a woman, and there's nothing wrong with that. We don't even have to say it. But women are always saying they want to be independent. It's cool to be independent, It's cool to have somebody to share your life with. Stop passing up on all these nice, good men just because they can't afford to have you in your bikini on the back of a yacht. That's just not realistic. What's realistic is having somebody who's solid and there for you. And, you get some good laughs on the couch watching dumb movies and stuff like that. Time goes by quick and so many people are missing out on life. And, life is so much better when you have somebody to share it with, And women are just literally passing up on all these good men because they don't make 6 or 7 figures, passing up on companionship, and I'm not saying that, there's just a sea of great good men out there. There's a lot of trash in the ocean on both sides. Believe that. But, there are a lot of good, hardworking men who love their kids out there. What's up, gang? How you doing, Abba Reality or Reality? Sorry. You see I have glasses on. The writing's very small. But what's up, bro? Thank you for joining. Thank you for listening. There are a lot of good men out there, and they are being passed up over just because they don't make financial requirements for a woman who has nothing to offer. Women have all these financial requirements and demands. Men can't make all these demands. You know, we, uh, we can't make all these demands. We're gonna be called misogynistic. We're gonna be called a-holes. We're gonna be called jerks. We're gonna be called juvenile. We're gonna be called immature. But women can demand the world. Why is that women can demand the world? They can have nothing to offer. They live in a messy apartment with absolutely no money to their name. But they can sit here and say a woman's worth, or that they're worth, and that they're worth a man that makes 500 grand. And he must make that to even date her and take care of her kids that isn't his. It's ridiculous. It's selfish. But then they say they want equality. Women say they want equality until you treat them like a man. Treat a woman like a man, that for 5 minutes, that equality goes right out the door. It goes right out the door. And I don't think women should be treated like men. I think a lady should be treated like a lady, and a man should be respected like a man, especially if they've earned those titles. Go to a restaurant with a woman and be like, bill's on you. Don't even add as soon as the waiter puts the bill down, just look at it and look at her. That's not going to fly. Men, start putting in your bios, or start demanding women, pay for your fade and your haircut and buy you a new outfit before she even takes you out one time. Anytime she takes you out to dinner, demand that she buys you some new shoes and a new outfit. It's not going to work. That doesn't work. Because as soon as you treat, you treat a woman like women treat men, that equality garbage goes out the door. Men could never dare to just start automatically saying women need to send them money just to go out with them. Men would be called every name in the book. They absolutely would. And that's why men need to have to be in a position where they don't need to depend on anybody. We can't cry and shed tears and everybody's going to come to our rescue and care and give you advice and give you hotlines and set you up with places to go. They're going to be like, man up, bruh. Pick yourself up off the floor. You a man. You need to man up. Like I said before, nobody tells a homeless woman to woman up. They'll give her a launder list of resources and places she can go for help and things like that. Like I said, they have all kinds of women's shelters and women's family shelters. The only shelter they have for just men is jail. Sorry, they're making me do some little thing. Oh, all right. Yeah, they have all kinds of resources. The only time men get free resources is in jail. Like I said, they have shelters for women, and they should. I'm not saying those are a bad thing. I'm just saying they have, when women fall on hard times, they have a lot more, resources. Shoes aren't my thing, bro. It's just a background. So if you're trying to start anything or be funny, I care less about shoes. It's just play money hobby. I don't go out. I don't really drink, but I like sneakers. So shoes ain't a flex for me, bruh. Anyway, a man should be able to pick up and leave at any time from any place and still be okay. Okay, I don't really want to talk about shoes, but I would never buy a pair of Dunks. Sorry, I'm not. Oh, I think I might have one pair that my girl got me, but sorry, bro. I'm not 22. Raven, hot take on the topic. Thank you, Raven. You know, I say this all. She said women need to learn how to make men feel loved and safe as well. And, she's absolutely right. Men got their defenses so high up and they're so used to being used. I don't even think men, you know, they don't even associate love anymore. And how can you feel safe in a situation like that when you always got your guard up from being used? So, Raven, I think you're exactly right. I think a woman should absolutely make her man, if she cares about him, feel, loved and safe. But never do that to a man who doesn't deserve it. I'm not here to say that. But if a man deserves it and he's holding it down, he should absolutely feel loved, respected, and safe. You know? So I appreciate that, Raven. I even appreciate that as from a woman saying that because, tell your sisters, tell, fellow women, it's okay. It's okay to make that man feel loved. You know, sorry, when a woman just has her hand out for what a man can do or what he can spend, he doesn't feel loved. He doesn't feel like you know, he doesn't feel respected. He doesn't feel, important to anybody but what he can do. And that's what my whole thing. It's getting very old. It's getting very old where just using is the way relationships go. Men, of course, lots of men use women for their needs. And, women are using men for money. It's like, okay, we get it, buddy. I don't know if you're grass, soccer field, whatever you think, bro. You know, do you. You shouldn't worry about the next man's shoes. That's very feminine of you. There's not a day in my life I sit there and be like, ooh, this guy's shoes are this or that. I'm worried about my money. I'm worried about my multiple streams of income. I'm worried about building myself. I'm worried about what I put into my body. I'm not worried about what the next man has on his feet. If I have shoes, they're for me. They're not even for you. So, I just say, worry about yourself. You're coming across as extremely feminine. These are the things you're saying are things that women say to other women. We grown men here talking about grown men things, and you're sitting here trying to like pick little fights and stuff. They're like, bag. I'm here to uplift men. A man can be a man whether he has Walmart shoes on his feet. There's men with work boots on their feet, on his feet. There's men that hold it down with, I'm not going to judge any man by his shoes or a book by his cover. So if you want to talk about my glasses or my shoes, good for you with that feminine energy, man. You sound like a woman. And that's embarrassing for you that you would even type that for everybody to see. Because real men, well, now you're talking about how I vote. You don't. Yeah, he's trolling real hard, Raven. He's really trying, but it's really coming across as feminine. Somebody who's even guessing who I vote for. That's funny. It's funny because this is one thing I will tell you seriously. I've never voted in my life, and I've proudly never voted in my life, and I've never seen a candidate that I've liked enough to vote for. So, there you go. I did say you were wrong. And I don't know why you're trying to be political. It's kind of one of my rules for my page here is that I don't want to talk about politics or anything like that. So, if it makes you feel better, I've never seen a candidate in my lifetime that I've researched that I align with or would vote for. So, good for you. Let's talk about manly things instead of being a trolling little girl. that is worried about other people's shoes and glasses. Like, who does that as a man? So the another big thing you should do to depend on just yourself is, number one, you just can't trust anybody. And I know that's a harsh reality and nobody likes to say it, or, it's not the ideal situation for how we want to think about the world, but you really, really can't trust anybody. And if you can, that's cool, but you still need to look at your parachute, your backup plan, your savings like you can't. If the hits the fan and all things go bad, you still got to pay that child support, brother. You still got to, make sure them kids eat. You still got to put that roof over your head. You still got to be able to hold on. A lot of people, these are expensive times out here. A lot of, you know, I feel bad for this younger generation, who's just getting out of high school. A lot of people can't afford, $5,000-$7,000 just to get into an apartment. It's not, things aren't just as easy as a transaction as they used to be, or a transaction or a transition for what they used to be when you had to situate your life in a different direction at the drop of a dime. And every man has to be willing to accept that he might have to do that one day. Life ain't just peaches and cream. Life ain't just peaches and cream. People are going to have bumps. I don't care how much money you have. That doesn't solve all your problems. I don't care how much money you don't have. That means you need to be working on yourself. You need to be working on yourself before you work on any woman or anybody else. You got to build yourself before you can build up a woman. You got to be, solid enough to have that family. And if you got kids, you got to be solid for them. They deserve it. That woman, she might not respect your job or your hustle, but, those kids, they see you. Those kids see you working hard. Those kids see you being able to take care of things. They will definitely grow up and respect your hustle. They will definitely grow up and respect your job and what you do. Even if it's not 6 figures and enough for the woman, the kids will respond. The kids will grow up knowing dad held it down. Kids don't grow up being like, oh, dad was a bum because, he didn't make 6 figures. He only made, 45, 60,000 a year, but they still ate. They still had a roof over their head. Kids don't grow up and micromanage, their parents. They want to see effort. They'll remember effort. They'll remember lack of effort. So, don't ever give up, because times will get hard. You're a man. You're going to have hard times. You know how many men right now are in child custody court? Child custody court, family court drives men to depression. Like it's just having to fight for kids that you love just as much as the woman does. That's another instance. You have to be ready to depend on yourself, because family court, child custody court, which way too many men who are willing, loving fathers end up in, it feels like you're fighting for your heart. It feels like you're fighting for your life. And men need to be, we got to be prepared for any fight. Especially you have kids with a woman and you're not together. You got to be prepared. You have to prepare yourself to go to fight for those kids as a man, because the system will steamroll your butt. The system will steamroll you and not care. It will leave you homeless. It will leave you transportation list, driver's license list. They won't care. They want their money like the mob, because the state gets their percent. They want that money. You know, it's a racket. So you need to be ready to fight battles. You need to be ready to depend on absolutely nobody but yourself with your back against the wall. Because as a man, we're going to have to fight. You're going to have to fight. Things are going to happen. You know, things are going to happen in your life. Lots of things are going to happen. You know, the more you prepare, the more you do for yourself, you know, the easier it is. The smoother it can be. It's never going to be 100% smooth, you know. Like I was saying earlier, people don't always get along forever. People don't always get along forever. People outgrow each other. You know, people just, you have to be ready to part with anybody. The only people you should be ready to not part with is your children. You know, you got to be ready to tell that woman goodbye. You got to be ready to tell siblings, cousins, family, friends, you know. You don't owe them any explanation, but you got to be ready to step back. If they're not edifying your spirit, they're not moving in the same direction as you, you know, they have different goals, or maybe they're stuck in the mud. Autumn, how you doing? Thank you for joining. Thank you everybody for joining. So, I know Raven, he sure was, and I had to quit. Thank you. Thank you everybody who's listened. So, you know, you can outgrow people and it's okay. But, you know, you outgrow somebody and you depend on them, then you're stuck. This can be for men or women. You know, you have to be ready, especially as men, to be independent. You have to be ready to depend on nobody. It's okay to outgrow family. It's perfectly fine to outgrow friends. You know, siblings, you know, if their motion isn't the right motion for you at this time in your life, you know, you can distance yourself from people. You don't owe anybody anything. Anybody who's hindering you from working on being the best version of yourself, you know, you distance yourself from them. You don't owe anybody any explanation for it. You know, you don't owe anybody anything. You know, take time out, work on yourself. You know, you have to be ready to jump ship before it sinks, fellas. Not after the ship sinks and you gotta bail out. You have to be ready to jump ship and have the foresight as a man to jump ship from any situation that's dragging you down. You don't go down with the ship. Don't go down with that. Jasmine, how you doing? You know, you have to be ready to jump ship from any situation that isn't making you a better person, or it's hindering you from being the best person, or it's blocking you from your goals or your dreams or getting your money. I mean, it could be just be that simple. You know, does that woman got you so clogged up in the head with arguing and going back and forth that you can't even focus on your goals and focus on your money, focus on your multiple streams of income? That's all bad news. That's all bad news. You know, you got to be with somebody who has your back, who's willing to cooperate with you, who, you know, shares your goals, who sees your vision, who believes in your plan. A man with a plan is, a man with a plan and respects himself and has boundaries. He's a dangerous man. I believe he can accomplish anything. But if you have no boundaries and you letting Women in your life walk on you. You're sending them money you could be spending on yourself and investing in your own dreams. Your only form of love in your life is sending money or being used for money, or you're messing with women that, they always got their hand out. You're just blocking all your dreams, all your goals. And it's because men are so thirsty. You take thirst out the situation. Cutie XOXO, how you doing? Thank you for joining. Thank you for listening. If you take thirst out the equation, we're going to have, we could shut down all that dumb BS. We could shut down all that dumb BS of women even thinking it's appropriate to have their hand out and ask men for their bills being paid, or large sums of money, asking men that they even hardly know. It's ridiculous. It's not even classy. It's not, what kind of morals do you have to just be going up to people who you hardly know and being like, you need to pay my bills, or you need to give me large sums of cash sent to my account like that? That's ridiculous. It's rude. Let's just call a spade a spade. It's rude to be asking people you hardly know, asking men you hardly know, to be sending you money or to be paying your bills. That's not cool. Men, don't fall for it. Don't do it. It's not your job. It's not your obligation. Chloe, how you doing? Thank you for joining. Thank you everybody who's liked, joined, followed. Thank you so much. Anybody who's listened, anybody who's even took a shred of information I've given and taken it with them. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. It's my pleasure to just, sit here and talk to people who are listening, and like-minded individuals who are, still interested in the opposite sex, respecting each other and liking each other for more than what they can do for each other, not just being transactions and paying for each other's time. Thank you to all the people that realize, the men still have feelings, that, men aren't just there to be used for women to finance their hot girl summer or their vacations or pay their bills. Men have feelings. We're human beings too. It's never, women, if you got a good man, show him some love, show him some appreciation. If he's holding it down and he deserves it, don't give him, halt the attitude, halt the chip on your shoulder. Rub that man's back if he's been at work all day and he's, keeping a roof over the head and keeping the kids fed. Men do, she said it on here earlier, men do need love and safety. And, it's hard to feel safe when you're with a woman that she won't even leave you for the next man with a little bit more money, or that's a little more exciting, or anything, if, you started the relationship with your wallet open. Everybody knows I'm a firm believer, if you start the relationship with your wallet and your wallet open, as soon as you close your wallet, she is gone. She is history. She is ghost. If you think that woman that you started a relationship with and you had to just pay her for just to get all this, her hair and nails done, and send her money for her to just sit down and have a meal with you, if you think that type of woman's going to be there for you when you need her, you are dead wrong, sir. She's going to be gone. You think a woman who you started the relationship with your wallet out is going to, you think she's going to be there through thick and thin. She isn't going to be, think she respects you. She isn't going to be there through thick and thin. She doesn't respect you. You are nothing to her. You're nothing but a come up. You're nothing but a, somebody to, to give her money. Is that what you want to be as a man? I hope not. We got men who can't even depend on themselves, and they're supporting women. They're sitting there, and you shouldn't be lifting these women up These women who have nothing to offer. And we got all these men out here lifting them up before they lift themselves up. I don't get it. I just don't get it. You know, how could you as a man even feel good about yourself when you're sitting there, you know, willfully being used? Just willfully being used. I don't understand it. You know, when you start out a relationship with your wallet open and you got to send her money just to take her out to a simple meal or pay for this and that. There's women out here who want you to pay for their child care, or they trying to order 5 different meals at the restaurant to bring some home for their kids and their, you know, their family. I mean, that's just using men. It's using men. I shouldn't even put these shoes, used it as a background. I don't really. You said women run the world, my guy. You know what? That's absolutely false. Men build everything. They run everything. Women could run the world, but they're too emotional and they don't know how to keep their legs closed. If they knew how to keep their legs closed and their emotions intact, they could run the world. They could absolutely take over the world. But, you know, actually, since the women's movement in the 1970s, you know, people who have listened to me, they know about, they know about my opinion since the 70s and the women's movement. I think the government tricked women to get out the house to tax the other half of the population, because women, you know, they were all up in arms about wanting to get out the house. They wanted a career, whoop-de-whoop-whoop. And now, you know, 30 years later, 50 years later, 60 years later, we got 10 billion women on social media sitting there showing off all their goods, trying to find a man who's rich enough, who can just, you know, make sure they don't have to work and stay home with the kids, as if staying home with the kids wasn't, you know, in a woman's DNA to begin with. I think women were totally tricked into that, leaving the house. So, you know, a smart woman can run the relationship 100% because men are so simple. King John BZ 35, Ryan Castro, hey, how you doing? Women can run the relationship 110%. A smart woman can. I think women get too overrun by their emotions, get too loud, get a woman with an attitude and who talks over you and always wants to argue. She can't, but a smart woman who knows how to sit back, be quiet, and do a bunch of good and sit back and manipulate behind the scenes by doing good things. Oh yeah, men are very simple creatures. I definitely think they can I help you find a Latina girlfriend? I don't know what part of the country you live in, brother. You said my woman's defiant. King John Beasy, you shouldn't be with a defiant woman, bruh. You're in Oregon? I don't know about Oregon. I don't know. I live in Scottsdale, Arizona, so you know, they're everywhere out here. I was gonna say, if you were out my way, it would be all you have to do is walk out the door. You said women wouldn't put a man to sleep anymore. You know, that's sad. You said she won't put you to sleep and she's defiant. That sounds like a bad combination, bro. Sounds like you could be doing bad by yourself. Man, there was a time I did have 6 women making me lunch, dinner, and snacks at the same time, but I had to grow up. Started, had daughters. Didn't want to be that guy. Didn't want to see them. I didn't want my daughters raised to see their dad taking advantage of women's liking for me, or, it's just a bad look. You have daughters, you got to grow up. What question did you say, Emmanuel? I didn't even catch it. KC, the purpose of life is for the universe to experience itself. Yeah, but experiencing life is always better with somebody else. Traveling, funny moments in movies, life with somebody who's a good companion and a good friend. Oh, sorry, is always better. Ing Breezy said, "Oh, I think there's good women of all different nationalities. Some women have actually been taught by their mothers to be good wives and how to treat a man, and they usually get more high value men. If these women are raised by single mothers who are screaming independence all the time and everything, 9 times out of 10, they grow up to be women that, don't really know how to treat a man. When a woman treats a man real good, as men, let's hear it. We want to treat that woman good. It's not just we're asking to be treated good and we don't want to treat her good back. Yeah, we want a good woman to treat good back. A real man does. A real man, he gets treated good by a woman, he's going to want to reciprocate. Okay, Brett Michael. Casey, I guess. Oh, DJ 1989. I say this all the time. It's okay. It's okay to be solo till you find the right one. Not only is it okay to be solo, I encourage it. I highly encourage you to fly solo as a man until you've lifted yourself up into a place where you don't need a woman. That's the point of my whole topic tonight. You shouldn't be, have your fun, get things out of your system while you're going through that phase. But, you know, to latch yourself onto somebody and be like, I have to have a woman or whatever, or I need a woman when you ain't even, you know, on a level of as a man, or you haven't reached your goals. Well, I think that's perfectly normal. Absolutely. A strong minded man is not afraid to be alone and to fly solo until he meets the right one. And a man, once you build yourself up as a man, if a man's got his body tight and his money right, finding the right one's so much easier. Women come easy when you got your body tight and your money right, and you don't need them. They can smell that you don't need them. They flock. They flock to you. No, you have your choice, and you're gonna pick the one that fits into your life the best, like a puzzle piece that fits in perfect. She's not gonna be some dominant telling you what to do, how to be a man. No, no, because she's gonna respect that she doesn't want to lose you because you're a high value man because you've worked on yourself. Absolutely, never be afraid to fly solo and work on yourself. DJ 1989. Absolutely, a relationship is better once everybody discovers themselves. That's why it's just a fact. Women mature faster than men. Some men, we shouldn't even be in a committed, solid relationship. I know you have needs. I know there's certain type of women you date for certain type of needs, but men, I don't think they need to even be in a real solid type, the type of relationship that leads to marriage or marriage until their mid 30s, late 30s. Samuel, how you doing? Thank you everybody who's thank you DJ 1989. I appreciate that. And I appreciate you chiming in on the topic about real stuff. Thank you. Man to man, salute. I appreciate you. Yeah. King John Beasy, he said women might run the world for the next 50 more years the way it's going. Yeah, because we got a bunch of men who are being raised by single mothers who are associating love with how much a man can spend. So a lot of young men are being taught that just along with our daughters. I don't know if women are going to be running the world, but we're sure raising a lot of doormats. We're You know, we're raising a lot of spineless men who don't know how to say no, even when it's in their best interests. And saying no is one of the most self-respectful signs of boundaries thing a man can do. Say no. Say no to anything that doesn't align. You know when you're being used. Say no. I don't care how pretty she is. I don't care how cute she is. Say no. She asks you to pay for anything that's not your obligation. Say no. And yes, men can say no to a beautiful lady, King John. It is possible. It is very possible. And you know how I know it? Because women love a man that can say no. A beautiful woman is she's so used to being told yes all the time. Beautiful women rarely hear no. They're so used to men kissing their behinds nonstop. Then when a man doesn't kiss their behind, all of a sudden he's intriguing. A beautiful woman is much more likely to sleep with a man who's willing to put up boundaries, say no, and not kiss her behind. You know, when I was younger, I had my fair share of nice looking ladies, ignoring them, ignoring a beautiful woman. They're so used to everybody kissing their behinds. When you ignore them, they think they're so not used to it. They need to get your attention. And a lot of times they think, oh, you know, I got to get his attention by sleeping with him. It happens all the time. You know, that's just a little friendly piece of advice there. Learn to tell beautiful women no, or women that you're attracted to. You should be able to tell all women no. I don't care if it's your wife. No woman you should just be a total pushover for and always saying yes to. Women don't respect that at all. So, you know, I don't get your question, what you supposed to be. I don't, if you frame that a little bit more, I'd be happy to answer, but thank you for being here. You said, I ain't saying no to no beautiful women. So if a beautiful woman just asks you for anything, you're just going to say yes? Come on, bro. You better than that. If you got, I highly doubt you have an unlimited supply of money. If you got your bills due, or she asks you for some money, are you going to tell her yes and forgo what you have? Nobody says nobody says nobody says you have to ignore a beautiful woman, King John. You don't got to ignore a beautiful woman. Nobody's saying ignore her totally, but I mean, if you start, throwing a little, highs, or, maybe you buy her a coffee at work and she's not reciprocating, you knock all that stuff off. We ain't simping. We ain't buying women's affection in 2026. No, we're not buying women's affection. We're not being willfully used. Nobody said, I don't know how to ALNZ00. Nobody says you got to ignore. Matter of fact, a lot of women, a lot of beautiful women, they're truly beautiful women, are intimidating to a lot of men. So if you just step to them with confidence and look them in their eyes like you're not intimidated with them, that's another thing they're not always used to. If you can step to a beautiful woman and, look her in her eyes and give off more confidence than most men, because most men are so intimidated and turn into goo and mush around her because of her beauty, that women are very attracted to that. Self-confidence is always a winner. It always will be. It always has been. A man who can, exuberate self-confidence, you're always winning. That's in the workforce, with your money, with your friends, with women. Self-confidence is key that can unlock just as many doors as a degree. Said, Jesse, you said your girl won't look you in your eyes. I don't know. That sounds like, and that doesn't sound like she's your girl. You know, your girl should look you in your eyes like a like a like a puppy just melting. You know, Brandon, don't say that. I just want to say, Brandon, I'm gonna take some time and stop my whole thing because I see you said you're struggling to not end it, and I just want to say, man, you're worth something, bro. Don't do that. Don't do that. Don't let anybody tell you you're not. Don't let anybody, you know, make you think otherwise. Though, you know, you have a lot to offer this world. We all do. Take some time and work on yourself. You said, somebody said, not everyone is wife material. You're dang right. Not everybody is wife material. Matter of fact, it's becoming slim pickings out here because so many women have been taught independence, and, you know, they've been raised by women who don't even have the foggiest clue of how to even treat a husband or how to treat a man, you know. Thank you, Brandon. Said you just got dumped after 13 years. You know, I'm not saying that's easy. That's horrible. You know, we send in love to Brandon. Brandon, I wanna tell you something. You said I can't do it anymore. You gave everyone your best, and now you got nothing. You know, you might not believe this, bro, but, you know, I've been there. I've been there, and I felt the exact same way you were. Feel like I gave everybody everything I had, and I put everything aside to help everybody. You know, I made sure everybody else was educated. I made sure everybody else had everything they need, and I never took care of myself. That's one of the things where kind of I'm saying you got to be able to depend on nobody, but, you know, it's lonely. But, man, Brandon, like, you have a lot to offer, bro. I know it hurts. I know I've been on the end of my rope myself. I've been in some dark places myself, and it's nothing I even want to talk about. It's not a road I want to go down. I just want to share that you are not alone, but you have a lot to offer in this world. You need to really, I know you expressed or you gave a lot to everyone, but it's time for you to give to yourself. It's time for you to work on yourself. And I know you would do it again for these people because you're a good-hearted person, because you did it in the first place. And you shouldn't want to take back anything you've done. But I wish I did have the number. There are numbers and things to call. And, you know, but I mean, I'm going to sit here and talk to you, bro. Brandon, don't leave. Let's just, you know, let's chop it up for a minute. Because I want you to know that, did you say if I didn't have kids, you'd be a goner? Well, that's exactly what kept me going too, bro. But you gave to everyone else. It's time to give to yourself. Because if you don't give to yourself, you can't even be good to those kids. You got to build yourself up. I know it sounds cliche. I know it's what everybody says. You know, start with simple things you can control. You can't, there's not much we can control in this crazy world, but we can control our bodies, what we put into our bodies. You know, start small. Start with the gym. I know it sounds cliche. I know in times like this, you don't even want to do nothing. You don't even want to get out the bed. I've been there. It feels like you don't even want to have a reason to get out the bed. You just want to wrap up in a blanket and do nothing and think the thoughts that you've been thinking. And my kids made me hang on. Those kids need you, and you don't want them to have the memory of you, of what you're talking about. You know, they need they need you, whether, you know, a woman's telling you they don't, or even they are telling, don't give up. They will grow up and they will respect you for holding on, for hanging on, for supporting them. Doesn't matter how much money you make, as long as you're there as every time you can be, as long as you know. Oh, okay. Well, good. That's good, bro. Good, bro. From your earlier, what you said, you sounded a little bit on the fence there, and it is. It's literally exhausting. It is exhausting, and it's hard and it's exhausting, and I know you don't mean like physically, you're physically tired. It's just such a mental drain. And you know, I'm glad you said you're not going to hurt yourself, bro, because you know, the fact that you said if it wasn't for your kids, I know you love them a lot. And exactly. They said, Alex said, most people have been there, bro. It only gets better. It really does. And like I said, I don't want to keep sounding cliche, but it really does get better. Elizabeth, if you were talking to me or you're talking to Brandon, you said you manifest. Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, I feel like I don't even know how I got to where I'm at right now, or how I got out of the situations I was in. I know I was, and I think putting yourself in a good place mentally brings you to a better place. You know, Einstein said it. Many philosophers said it. Most, you know, a lot of religions and philosophies say it. They say thoughts of the mind become your reality. Thoughts of the mind become your reality. So, and I know Marshall said, honestly, being stuck broke really depresses me. Well, I don't know the exact ramifications of your situation, but you know, just going to what I was saying, cut ties with people who are hindering your success. Cut ties with people who don't believe in you. Cut ties with everybody. Be like we were talking about earlier. You can't be afraid to step back and work on you. You know, you can't be afraid to step back from everybody. The point of my entire topic. Brandon, I don't even want to sit here and say I can um, empathize with what you're saying. I, you know, Lord knows I've been there with the relationships and the tear, but I don't want to say I could ever say I wouldn't wish that what you said about your daughter fighting the cancer on my worst enemy, brother. My heart goes out to you, and I couldn't even imagine seeing my daughter in that situation. My son had an accident before, and he was in a coma. My oldest son, and I had to hold his hand while he was in a coma, and I wouldn't wish that upon any parent. But it was something that, once he came out of that coma, he was pretty cool. I can't imagine you having to deal with the cancer of a child, and just, stay strong. Like I said, I'm not trying to sound cliche or sound like just some person who doesn't care, just throwing someone, because I'm really, really, my heart goes out to you. The things you're saying, it sounds like you've had to deal with a lot in the last, I don't know how long it was. And I know you're saying with your situation, you can't, give someone what they need right now, but, you're never in a perfect situation. You're never. I was at my, I was, I had gotten custody of my son, and, we were hanging on by a thread, when I happened to meet my wife, who just changed my life. And she changed my life by just, by somebody finally supporting me and believing in me, and it made me the best version of myself. I didn't even know how successful or how good or how far I could go because I never had somebody believe in me, but she just fell in my lap. So there's never a perfect situation, Brandon. People out there, there's never a perfect situation. But if you're a good person, you keep putting the foot in front of the other foot every day, putting your pants on one leg at a time. You're not maliciously trying to hurt anybody. You know, Vic Cars, I appreciate you. Thank you so much. That's all I ask for. I don't even care if you follow me or like me or anything. If I could just plant any succeed, a little seed of hope or success or positivity in somebody's head, I really appreciate it, Vic. That means a lot to me, bro. But like I was saying, just don't give up as a man. Brandon, I thank you, Vic. I appreciate you, bro. Thank you. Up through every little situation. We can never step back. We can never show weakness. You know. And Brandon, like I was saying before, it's okay to show weakness as a man when you're going through traumatic things like that. But never say you're not in a position to offer somebody something. You are in a position to offer somebody just a good heart. A good-hearted person, and you can give them true companionship, true friendship, be a real person. They're going to respect that. Not all these women out here are, you got to pay them just to spend time with them. That's ridiculous. Vic Cars, you're a salesman in the automotive. You make a lot of money, but you mismanage it. You know, I don't know how old you are, but for younger men, and it happened to myself, mismanaging money is kind of a thing that kind of goes with the territory. But, you know, you obviously are growing up because you're doing something wrong. But I advise you to, start using that money to invest in things that work for you when you're asleep. Get that money working for you. Set aside play money. We all, you're going through a divorce right now. Well, that can be expensive. But I don't know what you meant by mismanaging. I don't know if you're spending it on yourself. Well, Vic, you say you're 53. There's a good thing that men don't really have a ceiling. That's kind of one of the things where life's not fair. A lot of women, they start to have a ceiling and age creeps in. Men, we can get on our stuff at any age. It's never too late. DraftKings. Don't do it. Don't do it. DraftKings, I know it's not sexy, but, a CD and a, IRA account, investing in stocks and, throw your money into Bitcoin before you throw it into, DraftKings. You might as well go to the casino every night. That's a vice. We got to be better than that. You got to tighten up that one. Brandon, you said you're only 31. You're so young, bro. You're so young. You still got You know, Brandon, you got so much time to build. You know, if you start thinking right, you could already be ahead of the game. You just need to start fully focusing on yourself and your child. Don't worry about that woman. Don't worry about finding another woman. You worry about being the best man you can be, being the most financially sound man you can be, working on multiple streams of income. Like I said, sometimes, you know, putting money in things that it takes years for your money to grow, or things where your money, you can't touch your money. It's not sexy, it's not cute, you know, but it really brings, you know, a wealth into your later years. You know, you're 31, in 10 years you put your money into a CD you can't touch for 7 years. You're gonna start realizing investing in yourself is the best way to go, and the best way to be solid, and the best way to be happy. Don't, you know, I can't speak on your daughter's situation, but don't let a woman. Okay, I'm glad you're not worried about a female right now. That was going to be uh, the next words out my mouth. Vic, you said you banned yourself from the app. That's good. That's good. You could get an E-Trade account and just start buying. That was one of the first things I didn't know jack crap about investing. I started investing in just things I used, things I had. You know, I didn't want to just have a lot of sneakers. I wanted to, you know, I wanted to own part of Nike. I don't, you know, just things I use. My girl drinks Starbucks, so I bought stocks in Starbucks. You know, the airlines I fly out the most, I just bought stocks in the airlines I use the most. Just simple, just, you know, I didn't get a bunch of books or take a bunch of classes. I just started, you know, because I was typical man. I was mismanaging my money too. I was, you know, hanging out with the ladies too much, you know, going out too much, doing all kinds of dumb stuff too. You know, we all been there. Uh, but, you know, it was time to tighten up. 2025 was, you're a six-figure man. I don't know how that divorce is going to treat you, but, you know, you have so much. If you're a single man, obviously you're not with your woman. I don't know how the divorce is going to treat you, but you should have a ton of extra money to start investing in yourself. Brandon, you say you got $28 to your name, but money doesn't fix the issues you're dealing with. Well, you know, if you think that the bottom didn't create some of the strongest men out there, you better believe it did. You know, show me a man who hasn't experienced the bottom, who hasn't had to, you know, deal with hard times. I'm going to show you a weak man. You know, having a few dollars in your bank account and having to get by and having to rise to the occasion is absolutely something that builds real men. So I suggest you seize the opportunity. Vic, you know, Vic with the cars, you know, I seize the opportunity yourself. You know, a divorce is no fun. Just because you make a lot of money doesn't mean a divorce is easy. Pressure creates diamonds. Exactly, Brandon. Exactly. When you show me a man who's never been under pressure, I'm going to show you a very soft man. He's going to be soft as a cotton ball. He's going to be a pushover. Everybody who comes at him is going to be able to take a bite out of his ass. You know, I'm not saying what you're going through is easy, but you need to just realize that your situation now, embrace it. In every single thing you do should be working on you. I don't care if that means you got to roll out of the bed in the morning and do push-ups and sit-ups. Like I said, start with what you can control. Vic, start with what you can control. You know, you said you deleted that app. Salute, brother. You got to start somewhere. Just like I tell people, you know, I tell men, you know, go to the gym, drink water, put down the bottle. If that, don't take that drink. Gambling is so addictive. I know it. I had an uncle who lost everything to gambling. He had a beautiful home. He was always leasing a new car every year. He'd always get a Navigator, an Escalade, or something nice. Lost it all. Lost everything. He was in an apartment in a little shitty, excuse my language. Ooh, excuse me. He ended up in an apartment in a little crappy Pontiac car because of gambling. You know, absolutely, Vic. You'll make it through it. God'll get you through it. You gonna be a true testimony. Matter of fact, that just because of your attitude, like, do you know how strong your attitude is? Like Vic Cars, I love your attitude, bruh. Like you're a realist who set your cards on the table. You said, here it is. But you know what I like the most about you? You took accountability. I didn't see you blaming her for a bunch of crap. Even if women aren't perfect, it's our fault for putting up with it for as long as we did. You said you're on good terms with her. That's awesome. I don't see you pointing any fingers like a small man would. I see you taking accountability and trying to do what's best for you and asking what you can do. Now, if somebody else can do for you, that was the whole point of I know I probably went off topic and we've been talking about other things. Brandon, of course, you can private message me, big dog. I'll probably get to the message after I go off this stream because I'm not very great with technology and things like that. So I don't think I can do both, but I will absolutely message you back. And that is a promise. So you can send me a message and I will definitely message you. I'd love to talk to you. So, and I love your strength. I love your strength. So if I can be there for anybody that, even if you just believed in my words and appreciated what I was talking about enough that you would even reach out to me, I feel honored. So absolutely you can message me. No problem. Vic with the cars. Vic Cars. For a man who's going through a divorce and admits he's going through some things and has some issues, like I said, I just really, really admire your accountability. That's such a lost art today on these younger people, men, women, people our age. You're older than me, but people your age, you took self accountability and you have an attitude like, I'm gonna get through this. You ain't pointing fingers, you ain't blaming people. You said you're in a good relationship with the woman you're divorcing, good for you. There's no doubt in my mind that you're going to get through what you were getting through. I think, I think you're taking the steps that you need to take. And just man to man, I'm just going to say I respect that. And not enough men tell men, or men aren't even told, period, by women or men when they're on the right path or what they're doing is respectful until they've already made giant steps. Taking those little steps is just as important. Matter of fact, those little steps are more important because those little steps are sometimes the hardest. Sometimes the very hardest to, That's why I say, I preach it. I say it, start with the things you can control. He started with deleting that app. If you can't control anything else, you can control what you put into your body. Put good things into your body. You can't put pollution and garbage and processed garbage into your body and expect your mind to function properly. Man, God bless you too, sir. Thank you for speaking with me. Thank you for engaging in conversation. And thank you for having a positive attitude. And thank you for being a man who takes accountability. Because a man who takes accountability, you're already more masculine than 90% of these men out here. So Vic Cars, it was a pleasure engaging with you. And thank you for talking with me too. The pleasure was all mine, actually. But, Men, you know, I want to say thank you to everybody who's listened, anybody who's taken anything from this, anybody who said anything positive. You know, I appreciate each and every person who's just said anything positive. If I missed some people who were tuned in and I was ranting or talking to some of these guys, I'm sorry I missed you, but I want to thank every single ear that tuned in and has listened, because I fully believe that men are being devalued these days by all these demands, and that people are thinking that that it's a men's job to pay Don, what's going on, bro? How you doing? Thank you for joining. You know, it's not a man's job to be used, and a man doesn't need to feel like he's less of a man because he can't take his woman on vacations every 2 weeks, and because he can't take her to the Louis store and spend $30,000. I want men to feel like they are still worth. That's some sick stuff you're playing. I don't know. How do we block people on here? Yeah, I wish I knew how to block people, because there's some sick people on here, and I don't like that type of stuff. That needs to be banned, because I'm not for hurting anybody. I'm pro peace. I don't like to see anybody even talking like that. It kind of disgusts me. Thank you, Brandon. I appreciate you reporting that, because I don't know how. I'm not the most technologically advanced man, but thank you for doing so, because I'm trying to keep it positive in here. I want to keep, like I said, I want women to succeed too, but there's so many TV shows and podcasts and influencers that tell women that, in my opinion, they almost tell women that they can do nothing wrong and that they should be able to demand the world even if they have nothing to offer. And I just want to know, men, we should be able to make demands. Men, you shouldn't always, we shouldn't always be settling. We shouldn't always be taught to settle. Because, a man shouldn't settle for anything either. We shouldn't settle for people who don't support us, for people who use us. We shouldn't be taught to settle for people who talk to us with disrespect or a rude tone. Like, no, I do not know that guy, and I would have no idea what their name was. Hell no. I actually think the people who do things like that should deserve the death penalty. So, anyway, thank you, Brandon, for reporting it. I'll learn how to block and report people myself. Brandon said, women, children, and dogs are the only one who's loved unconditionally. And, sadly, I think you're right. No, I'm not a stud, but is that your way of saying I'm pretty, Nat? What? There's a lot of trolls on this. But anyway, you're right. Women and dogs get unconditional love. Men, we get loved, and our worth is measured by how much money we have. No woman's worth is measured by how much money she has or how much money she made that year. A man's worth can almost be literally put by how much he has in his bank account. So, you're 100% correct, and that's one of the things I think is sad, because I think, men deserve to be loved unconditionally if they're doing some unconditional loving too. It needs to be returned to men. So, men are definitely lacking unconditional love because there's so many conditions for love for men. How much they have to make, how much they have to provide, how much they have to protect. You know, they have to do this, they have to jump through hoops. You know, uh, yeah, I don't really want to talk about shoes. I wish I wouldn't even put this as just a corny background because I really want to keep it serious with uplifting men. I think we've been talking to some men that I really enjoyed talking to about, you know, men finding value in themselves, respecting themselves, men valuing themselves in a world today that doesn't value men as people. We're just a paycheck. Women look at us as a lottery ticket, a come up, you know, a way for their life to just instantly glow up and blow up. And that's why it's so socially acceptable. Oh, it's all good. You don't have to apologize. You don't have to apologize at all. I appreciate you tuning in. I appreciate you listening, and I appreciate you showing curiosity. That's why I said I wish I went to put it as a background because I don't want to pique that curiosity. But it's my own fault. I'll take accountability for that. But no, I don't have the black cats. The only thing I'll tell you about my shoes are my Jordans. I only really buy Jordans that he wore when he was playing. Not too big on any of the new things. But, the world doesn't really value men, and that's why we have to be able to be ready to depend on nobody. So, it's not fair, but it's just facts. A man's worth is just pretty much measured in what he can do for a woman or his children. And I mean, that's just the way it is. It's not going away. It's not going away. It's just, it's just one of the ways the world works, and it's not always fair, but, it's just how it is. Our worth is measured in what we can do for women and children, how much we can spend. And being that things are probably not going to change, we still need to embrace it to a point. Of course we have to be men, but we shouldn't be ready to settle for no love, no companionship, no respect. Men shouldn't be taught to settle. Men shouldn't be taught that a woman can, a man should respect himself, not to have a woman just talking all crazy to him or asking him for things that he has no business paying for. Yeah. Women are not women will tell each other and tell themselves all the time, pretty over perfect. They choose, they don't settle. You're right. Women are told to never settle. Women are told to never settle. He never makes enough. He never, it's this, it's that, never settle for, he's boring. You don't like the way he talks to you. He works too much. He works too little. Women are told, but men can't talk like that. Vic with the cars. I'm in Arizona right now. I'm from Tennessee, but I live in Arizona. But yeah, women are told to never settle. They can always do better, but let a man be like, a man, he's supposed to settle for, an attitude. He's supposed to settle for, all types of things. If a woman lets herself go, a man's told he's supposed to just sit there and just take it. He can't leave. He's a jerk. He's a misogynist. You know, there's nothing wrong with telling men they don't need to settle. You know, there's nothing wrong with telling men they need to be independent until they've built themselves up and where they can get, you know, the type of woman they deserve. You know, there's nothing wrong with telling men that they deserve the best too. You know, I think see, Brandon, you're already thinking proactive. I love it. You're already thinking of what your next move should be. And you're going to make it happen, brother. You're going to make it happen. I got full faith in you. Pretty over perfect. Take yourself out that world and it wouldn't affect you. Well, probably right. You're probably right. Well, I'm not in that world. I'm just preaching to men that are in that world and asking them not to be, because, you know, if there weren't a bunch of men out there, there were a bunch of weak men out there who were doing these things and paying for these things, nobody'd be asking for them. So they're actually enablers. So, you know, absolutely, I agree with you. So, you know, men, you got to be willing to just step back and work on you. And it's not always easy. Sometimes you are really, really starting from pretty over perfect. She said, some men like to pay. Well, I don't consider those men. I consider those little lost boys. Those are little lost boys, because no real man who values himself likes to pay for a stranger, or likes to be asked for things from a stranger, or for somebody they hardly know asking them to pay for things that they have no obligation or business paying for. Nobody with morals asks somebody they hardly know to pay their rent or their bills, or, you know, absolutely not. So no man who respects himself, no high value man's even going to put up with that. So, you know, if you like to pay for your girl and that's your girl, she's had your back for a while, and you guys are down and cooperating and building something, there is nothing wrong with spoiling a woman like that, and, you know, paying for her, and, you know, because she's reciprocating that love and you feel safe around her, and that kindness and that cooperation, you know, reciprocation. I'm all for that. If somebody's nice to you, you're nice to them. If somebody takes good care of you, you take good care of them. It just can't be a one-way street. It just can't be all she takes, and you just give. That's being used, and a lot of young men don't realize they're even being taken for a ride because they were raised that that's how you show love. And that's very sad. Let's see, pretty over perfect. It's easier they pay for what they want and then they don't have to deal with the headaches. Well, yeah, that kind of sounds like a service worker. That's like saying, you know, paying, you know, I don't like to say the P word, but, you know, when you pay for a woman's time, we all know what type of woman that is, that you have to pay for her time and her services. So, you know, if a man wants to pay for a woman's services just because that's easier and more convenient for him, more power to him. I'm just saying, don't wife those type. You know, don't try to be engaging in a long-term, committed, you know, we're going to try to build something relationship with those kind. If a man's paying and getting what he pays for and he enjoys that, you know, but, you know, those type of women are service workers. If you have to pay a woman for her time and her services, then she's that type of woman, and that type of woman isn't wife material. That she's not relationship material. She's not long-term partner material. She's the type of woman who is suitable for that situation at that moment, and that's it, and you leave them there. She said, I mean, it's saying called happy wife, happy life. You pay to keep your wife happy. Wow. If you got to pay money to keep your wife happy, then you married the wrong person, because your wife should be happy just being in your plan, in your presence, being happy, being a part of what you're building. She should be happy because she loves the crap out of you and loves being next to you. Brandon, I'm in my mid-40s, brother. You know, a happy wife, where happy wife, happy life, if you got to just spend and pay to make your wife happy, that's actually a sad relationship. That's really sad, you know. What about happy husband? Does the man deserve to be happy, or what does he get out of any of this? Is, you know, I'm really curious about that. What does a man get to get out of it? If it's happy wife, happy life, does that mean, does she have to cook? Does she clean? Does she take good care of the kids? If you're taking care of a woman and she's doing all that, I don't see anything wrong with it. But, people do set up different terms in their relationships. Different people set up different terms, and I'm all for it. Whatever works for them. I'm not hating on anybody who's happy and who has something that works for them. No, it's not even my business, but, I just want to see men not be used and actually be cared about. Men, there's a lot of men who have great personalities, and they can, they deserve to be valued and appreciated and have somebody that cares about them for who they are. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying anybody's wrong, but I'm just saying there's a reason why, divorce rates are sky high, why there's so many single women right now, and a lot of single men, and a lot of men are choosing not to even deal with dating, and they prefer this paying method that you're talking about and we've been talking about, because there is no value, there is no love, they don't get anything in return but maybe their needs met, just one type of needs. High level women don't cook or clean, but they handle business. Pretty over perfect. I'm going to have to totally disagree with you. If they don't cook or clean, what business do they even handle? Because a high value man, we don't need your career. We don't need your money. I reached a point in my life, I don't need a woman for any type of money things. I don't need any boss energy. I don't need any of that. I need a woman who's nice, who takes good care of my kids. A high value woman absolutely cooks and cleans, like 1,000%. I don't know what energy you're talking about, but it seems like, you want the woman to be the man in the relationship. She doesn't cook, she doesn't clean, but she handles business. There is no perfect wife. That's a great question. You said you're older. What's the secret of finding the perfect wife? There is no perfect wife. There's no perfect husband, but there is cooperation. There is treating each other with respect. There is talking to each other with a proper tone. Do you know how far tone and cooperation go? Nobody's perfect. No relationship is perfect. And I'm not even advocating for perfection. I'm advocating for men to stick up for themselves and not be used as a paycheck or a lottery ticket or a come up. So, I don't think do you think Beyonce cooks and cleans? No, she's a billionaire. I don't think she cooks and cleans. But does she handle business? I think she's an excellent businesswoman. Would I want to marry a woman who has a career like that? Absolutely not. Number one, I need somebody who's going to be there with my children on a daily basis. I wouldn't want maids or nannies or daycares raising my children. I like my woman at home. My woman has a degree in psychology. She has a degree in biology, and she has a degree in marketing. I have a very educated woman, but I wanted a woman who actually likes being there for my kids, because I don't want my toddlers and my young kids being raised by daycare workers and raised by other people. Absolutely not. I don't care. Beyonce, she's a very, she does handle business, but I wouldn't want a woman who has that big of a career like that. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I want a woman who actually enjoys being there with her kids. We got we got billions of women, millions of women all over social media right now showing off all their goods, trying to find a man so they can stay home and take care of the kids and do nothing else. So, you said, why not? Why not what? Pretty over perfect. Why not? I mean, I don't know if you're asking me why I wouldn't want a career like that, a woman with a career like that, because I want a woman who's there with my children. That's very important to me, that I married a woman that it was a priority for her to want to be home with my kids, especially when they're small. I don't trust daycare workers and babysitters with infants or toddlers. I absolutely think children need to be with their parents especially when they're young, when they can't even speak and relate to the parents how they're being treated. And don't get me wrong, I know people got to work, and not everybody has the same opportunities I have, but so I know some kids do have to go to daycare, and I'm not knocking the parents that have to send them. I'm just saying, for myself and my children, I wanted a woman to be home as much as possible. I wanted a woman who wanted to be home with the children. So I don't want any woman that thinks she's a boss and has some career that's more important than taking care of my children. I said, Brandon, you said I raised all three of my kids. I was forced to give them the nurturing my children needed because of our nurse. Well, hey, you had to man up to the situation, and I respect that. Men can be nurturing to children too, and I don't want to be like chauvinist or come across in any sort of way. I think I think children need the nurturing of their fathers just as much as they need their mothers. Brandon, you said you did the mother's part. My oldest two sons, I had custody of them. I was a single father for a long time. And to all the single mothers out there, I know it's not easy because I've been there. I was a single father to two boys, and it's not easy. It's not easy. It's not easy at all to have to be mother and father to kids. I've done it. I've been there. It's and a lot of times I feel like, as a man, I'm not saying we need a pat on the back. We don't need credit or anything. But I was sitting there being a mother and father to my kids. I had custody of my son, and I was treated like I still didn't do anything for him. like I don't even know how that works. It would never work that way with a woman. Just like, my son lived with me full time, and I was still told by his mother I didn't do anything for him. Not too many men look at a woman who's got the kids full time, and the man doesn't be like, you do nothing for these kids. Like, just the hypocrisies. This was one of the reasons Brandon, you're right. And y'all two are talking about the gender roles. I'm a firm believer, you know, firm believer that the kids do need both if possible, but sometimes it's not always possible. And I don't know anybody's situation, but it's not always possible sometimes. So sometimes one parent does got to pick up the slack. And I salute all parents that do that, men and women. It ain't easy. It ain't easy. It's a tireless, thankless job. But you know, when those kids grow up right and you see them being kind to other people and being the type of human beings you want to raise, it's all worth it. It's all worth it. But yeah, there's definitely some nurturing and compassion that, you know, women are just natural, that they can show kids that men don't have that side. You know, men just don't have that side. I'm a firm believer that kids should have the opportunity, if all possible, to know and be around both parents, regardless if they're together. I think it's very sad if parents can't even get along, for both parents to know the child, or if a child is weaponized against another parent or used as financial gain, or put in the middle of a, you know, they're just mad at each other, but the child's being tug of war in the middle of it. That stuff makes me sick. You know, I can say personally that it makes me sick because I grew up a child like that. You know, I only had one parent. All my parenting skills just came from not being the parents that my parents were. You know, I saw firsthand my parents, you know, using me when I was a child to get back at the other parent. You know, I lost years and years of my life in knowing my father because my mom was angry at him. You know, I know, you know, my dad didn't fight a lick to even be with me. So, you know, I'm not saying it's both their fault. I'm not pointing the blame at anybody, but I know from firsthand, from dealing with it as an adult with my own children, and then being that child when I was a kid that got put in the middle of all that garbage, and I was used as a method of control and weaponizing against the other parent, because it's never, as long as the father is not a threat or hurting the child, that child needs to know his father. And you could say the same about women, but women get the children 9 times out of 10. Now, Brandon, you said her mother puts you down in front of the kids. That's, well, you know, Brandon, I know you don't want to hear this, man, but this might not be the exact thing you want to hear, or advice you want to hear, or what you want to hear right now. But if that's the type of woman you're dealing with, then you're lucky to lose her. You know, separating yourself from her, not being around her, her not being your woman. You don't even want a woman like that. I don't care if she's your child's mother. I want all kids to grow up, if possible, in a home with both of their parents. But it's not cool for, you know, kids to see their father put down, or see their mother put down, or be in the middle of arguments. If the house ain't peaceful, then it might be best for the people to be apart. And if you got some woman who's putting you down in front of your kids, that's not the woman for you. That might be the woman you had kids with, but she's not the woman for you. And I think deep down in your heart, you know somebody who could treat you like that. Number one, she's not afraid to lose you. No woman is afraid to lose a man that speaks ill about him to his children, or disrespects him, or puts him down. If a woman putting you down or disrespecting you, period, you know, she's literally saying, I'm not afraid to lose you. No, you want a woman who values you, because you value yourself too much to be with a woman who doesn't value you. And that woman right there doesn't value you. You know, you could take the best care of your kids. You can do whatever, Brandon. But if she doesn't value you, then you shouldn't be with her. You shouldn't, because you value yourself too much to be with somebody who doesn't value you. Oh, not your ex, but her mother, their grandmother. Well, it sounds like obviously y'all ain't together, so I'm just gonna I think you've been divorced since 2023. Well, I'm gonna tell you this. You can you're gonna find better. As long as you put those kids first, and keep keep waking up every morning, putting one foot in front of the other, not giving up, and always remembering that those kids will remember that you didn't give up. Don't let it be 10, 15 years from now and them kids are like, oh, those kids are going to remember that you fought for them, that you were there for them. They don't care what kind of job you have or how much you make. They're going to remember the time you were there, that you didn't give up on them. You got married at 20. I'm sorry to, I don't want to burst your bubble. I wouldn't advise any man to get married at 20. I think men personally themselves have way too much to get out of their system. And by no means am I saying you needed to get things out of your system. I just think men in general need to get things out of their system. 20 years old, that's still so young. I mean, you're just a kid. You're just a kid. We don't even, our minds don't even fully developed. Our brains don't fully developed until we're 25. We don't even know what we like, what we dislike. We don't know ourselves. That's sad. You got you said you grew up across the street from each other. It sounds like you guys had the Wonder Years thing going on, the Wonder Years love story going on. And it sounds like, you grew up across the street from each other, but it sounds like you grew apart when you became adults, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that, and I'm sure it was beautiful for some time, but I just thinking, now that you're older, and you probably agree with me that it was probably beautiful for some time, but you're probably a little bit young to be getting married. And so was she. So was she. I imagine if she grew up across the street from you and you were 20, she wasn't much older, and she might have been a year younger, but you were probably around the same age. You're just a couple of kids. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that. And there's nothing wrong with people growing apart. But now, Brandon, it just needs to, oh, she's 36, so she's a little older than you. But, so, just take, age doesn't matter, it just needs to be about, your life just needs to focus around you being the best man you can be and your children. That's it. That's it. Anything else is a distraction. Anything else from you building your money up, building your life up, building yourself up, and being the best man you can be for your kids and spending time with your kids, anything else is a distraction. Especially, you're not frat boy age anymore. You're not, college age. It's time to, I don't care how much you got in your bank account. Kids don't measure love with dollars. They measure it with time. You can be there for those kids. You're dang right. It's about the kids. You'll be all right. That's right. That's how I want to. You sound, even you sound so much more positive and optimistic right now than you did when you first chimed in. You sound like you gonna be all right. That them kids and your love for those kids is gonna get you through. And that's what a real man should sound like. Salute to you, Brandon. Seriously. It is hard, and sometimes we need people to talk to. Sometimes it might be a stranger, but sometimes I think you already knew what you needed to do inside your head. You just needed somebody else to confirm it. Okay, I need to learn how to block people. um, yeah. Um, Alicia Horton, thank you for joining. You know, Brandon, you said you don't have anybody to talk to. Sometimes it gets all bottled up. You know, I just want to say you're not the only man. That happens to so many men. And even when we want to talk, we're considered weak for talking, or we're considered complaining when we just need somebody to talk to, somebody so we don't explode. You know, even I admire your courage, even getting on here and being like, hey, a lot of men these days don't even have the courage to be like, hey, I need a little help. I need somebody to talk to. This is what's going on. Just to get airing out your system with things you need to talk about. It can mean so much. It can you know, just somebody reinforcing the things you already knew in your head. Like you said, it's going to be all right. Them kids are going to get you through. You got to live for them kids. Those are things you already knew. You didn't need me to agree with you. A lot of people, they go to therapy. They pay a lot of money for therapy just for somebody to agree with the things and reinforce the beliefs they already have in their head. Most people already have the answers. Most people already have the strength. But there is something about it that friends, it could be a therapist, it could be a stranger, but somebody just really believing in you and reinforcing your beliefs and telling you that your beliefs are valid, your feelings are valid. You know, that's something all humans need. That isn't just men, and women do too. That's some, but I mean, men, let's get it out our skulls. That it's weak to share things like, you know, you're gonna be bottled up until you explode and take out your anger or your misery on the wrong person or somebody who doesn't deserve it, or you're gonna take it out on yourself. You know, don't be afraid to talk to people. Don't be afraid to be like, hey, this is effed up and I don't deserve this. You know, I've been going to work. I've been busting my AWS. I ain't been hurting anybody. I take care of them kids. I don't deserve this BS. This is what's been going on. You said you went to couples therapy. All I heard was you went to couples therapy alone. All I heard is you were more invested in the relationship than she was, because you would have never been there alone. Especially for that long. It's not like she just missed one appointment or anything. And if you're more invested, if you're more invested in the relationship than somebody else or vice versa, it's never going to work. So once again, I'd say you're probably lucky to be out of the relationship. It's probably a good thing. You deserve better. You deserve somebody who values you, wants to be with you, and, appreciate you, and it's nothing you're on the hunt for. I get that. And that's not, no, but it will fall in your lap if you work on yourself and love them kids. It will fall in your lap. It might not be tomorrow, might not be this year, but it will. It will. There's been some courageous men sharing some things on my little live right now. I like to say thank you to each and every one of them, because as men, the world teaches us not to talk about our problems, to bottle up our problems. You're a bee if you complain, if you don't just suck it up and man up. Not being able to, no man should be able to just suck up having his kids taken, or having traumatic or long-term relationships just to dissolve. You should be asked to just suck it up. Do you have to suck it up? Absolutely. Will you have to suck it up? You better believe it. But, there's a lot of good people out there that are willing to listen. There's nothing wrong with saying, hey, I'm not being treated fairly, and I effing deserve more. I deserve to see my kids. I deserve to be in their life. I deserve a woman who talks to me with respect. I deserve somebody who values my time just as much as she values my money. You know? I get it, Brandon. You say you die for her because she gave you 3 of the best blessings. You know? I admire that. But, you know, it's also time to do you, bro. You know? Once, you know, I can almost guarantee this is going to happen, that you're going to get back on your feet and you're going to be doing good, and you're not going to care about, you're just going to be caring about your kids, and, the relationship with her is going to be in the rear view, and, you're going to be set in your head, and it's going to be okay in your head that it's over. And that's when you got your together and you're okay with it being over, that's when she's probably going to want you back. I've seen it happen so many times. I'm glad you're done chasing her, and you're showing self-respect. But watch, there's gonna be the day you're gonna get back on your feet. Your money's gonna be back right. You're gonna be back right, and you're just not, like, being with her is not, and thinking about her is gonna be totally out of your head. And she's gonna notice that it's totally out of your head. It always happened. She's gonna notice that you don't care anymore. She's gonna, you know, she's gonna notice she doesn't have her hooks in you anymore, and then she's gonna be like sniffing around. And I advise you not to fall for it, because don't go back down a path that led you to pain. But you're as a man, you're gonna be all right, and you're gonna get back right and get back how you want to be. And well, if she finds power in and knowing she provides, then that's her business now. Whatever, y'all ain't together. As long as she ain't providing for some man or whatever, doesn't take away from your kids, or she doesn't have some jerks or some weirdos around your kid, oh well. We can't worry about anything what she's doing, providing, doing this, doing that. That ain't your business. Them kids is your business, and building yourself is your business. That's it. Appreciate them times you had with her. Appreciate them kids. But, it's time for, I think, sounds like you're inching towards closure. You're almost there. I know you love her a lot and all that good stuff. But, my kids gave their dog to my aunt. Well, I don't know who he is, but I hope it's not somebody that's around your kids. Well, me personally, that'd be a real big red flag, because I'm an animal lover. Like, I really, really do see animals as, like, I'm not trying to sound corny or cheesy. Anyway, I'm not trying to sound corny or cheesy, but I really, really do love animals. Like, so I think anybody who can be cruel to an animal can be cruel to a child, and that would scare me. Matter of fact, serial killers and whatnot that's almost one of the biggest signs that a child is going to be a serial killer when he gets older, is that he's cruel to animals. So I really, really have a pet peeve about men or anybody who are cruel to animals. I think animals and pets are very innocent, and they didn't ask to be your pet, and they didn't ask, and we take them in. That's the very least we can do, is give them good care. Hell, I know you will, brother, but we can't think like that. But I like where your moxie is. I feel the exact same way about, People around my kids, even it's the exact same way, whether it be anybody, a teacher or anybody, you know. So I understand. I don't even want to go down that rabbit hole of darkness and start saying what we would do if negative things happen, but I know you would. I know you would, and I don't blame you, and I think myself and a lot of men would do the exact same thing. Uh, I don't know why this person keeps calling me a stud, but I'll take it as a compliment, so I'm a man. So you're saying, maybe you're saying I'm pretty, I guess. I'm not gonna let here and let anybody troll me or be negative. We're trying to lift people up here, so. Whew. Well, Brandon, you're a better man than me. You said you let him punch you 3 times and stood there because my kids were watching. You're a better man than me, because I start to see red when people put their hands on me, but you probably did right, because you mess around and fight back, and you mess around and Eric, what you doing? Thanks for joining. I appreciate all the likes. I appreciate all the listens. I appreciate all the follows. Just thank you everybody for even spending a minute listening to me, and I hope I could bless anybody who's listening with a little seed of positivity, inspiration, self-respect. We ain't here to disrespect anybody or troll anybody or argue with anybody. We're here to lift people up. We're here to, make people feel that it's okay to see value in themselves when nobody else does. We're here to teach men that it's okay to work on yourself. It's okay. You don't owe anybody anything unless you got children. Well, Brandon, it doesn't matter whether you could beat him up or you could beat him up. And, the main thing is you probably did the right thing, because if you ended up getting in a fight with him, then you probably could have got the police called on you, or if you whooped his behind, police could have got called on you. They can call you violent in court. You were doing the mature thing to make sure you get to continue seeing your kids, because that man and whooping his behind ain't worth, you losing time with your kids. So, keep fighting that mature fight, brother. You doing right, bro. You doing right. Like, you're doing all the right things. You're saying all the right things. You just need to get that confidence back up under yourself. Get that fire. It's hard to hold our tempers back in situations like that, especially when another man is putting his hands on you or touching you or hitting you or anything like that. But when you realize, when you're dealing with divorce and stuff like that, any little aggression a man shows will be used against him so quick in court, or so quick. And, a lot of times we have to put our emotions to the side. No, you don't need to be teaching your kid violence. You don't need to. You made eye contact with your son. You don't need to be showing him violence. And like I said, you start showing violence and you will be able to see him a lot less. I promise. That's usually how it works. You wouldn't be how many men get their buttons pushed on purpose and then their reaction is the problem? How many dads in child custody court and family court, the quickest way for a woman to get total control and custody is just push the man's buttons to the limit until he does something stupid. Don't be that guy. Whether it's him, her boyfriend, her mother, don't be that guy. Men, we got to be ready to be self-sufficient. I don't know why I couldn't say sufficient earlier. It was like a mental block. I couldn't say it for the life of me. But, we have to be self-sufficient and ready for the fallout. Look at my man Brandon here. He said he grew up with his wife for living across the street from him, known her for years. You know, it's easy to get comfortable, but that floor can fall out fast. A woman can switch it up fast. People outgrow each other. You know, you outgrow friends, you outgrow situations, you outgrow jobs. You know, Jesse's is organized and unprofessional. You know, no, absolutely. You don't love you too, bro. You don't hold on to nothing that's killing your spark. I advise men all the time. You know, if if you're with a woman and she's always arguing with you or combative with you, that'll kill your spark. It'll kill your determination. It'll kill your goals. It'll kill your dreams. You know, you got to love yourself enough, men, not to, of course, women too. You got to love yourself enough, people, to tell people no. I'm not gonna, or to just even not have people in your life that are always competitive or, blocking your goals or, get those type of people out your life. Distance yourself from them. Nobody says you gotta break up with your friends and tell them you can't be friends. Just distance yourself with them. You don't owe these people anything. You don't owe them any explanation. You don't owe them anything. Like, absolutely nothing. Like, you do what's best for you. You make sure your parents are good. You make sure your kids are good. You make sure yourself is good. And then you bring in somebody who fits into your plan, your master plan. Yeah, Brandon, there must be a reason that you tuned in tonight, man, because I think when I was younger, we didn't have the exact same situations, but when I was my second oldest son, his mom just dropped him off with me for like 2.5 years. Like, literally just, out here, you take him, for like 2.5 years, and then we ain't hear from her. She ain't see him. She hardly called. And all of a sudden, one day, she just drove into town, and the school allowed her to come pick him up, and she just hit the highway and took off and stole him. This is before I was a more established man. I didn't have much money at the time. I was a much younger man. And, I had to hire, with my last cents, I had to hire a private investigator to find him in another state. I had to hire lawyers. I had to drain everything I had to find my kid and to find my son. And, I literally, she dropped him off with me for 2.5 years, almost 3 years. If a man did that and he just drove into town and tried to pick up his kid, he'd get a kidnapping charge. Like I've been there, bro. Well, I appreciate that, man. I appreciate that, Brandon. My kids are young, so I try to give them the world, and, I don't think they're old enough to appreciate even having a father, because I didn't even have a father. So I try to give them all the things that I didn't have as a kid growing up, and I don't even think they're old enough yet to appreciate it. But I'm positive when they get a little bit older, they will truly, and then, they're out in the world, and the world, you know how the world treats people. It'll make you grow up quick. So I'm pretty sure they'll appreciate me. There's no doubt in my mind. But, they're kind of in that young adult, teenage phase where they're kind of like, their world just revolves around them and their little friends and everything. But there's nothing wrong with that, because when I was the same age, I was doing the same thing. I thought, My world, the world didn't go past my little hood, my little neighborhood, my street, my selfish needs were, it's just part of being young. It's part of being young. That's why they say youth is, wasted on the young. You know, they were, and I'm not saying that, Brandon, I'm not saying that my kids don't value me. They thank me and value me and everything, but, I just don't, they're just too young to see the bigger picture, too young to, they're great kids. They're great kids. But I don't think that they get how blessed they are to just even just have to have two parents that fully support them. I never did my whole life. I didn't even have one parent, I didn't. So, you know, I'm not looking for any pats on the back. I'm not looking for any gifts or appreciation or anything. My kids are great. They're but I mean, I just want to sympathize and empathize with you that, you know, I've had to watch my kids by myself. Well, I appreciate the pat on the back. If people like you, who I don't even know, appreciate any positivity I'm giving out, that means the world to me. It really does, because that's why I'm here doing this. I'm not sitting here trying to get influencer rich and famous or anything. I'm really genuinely trying to talk to people. That's why I don't allow no negativity in my thing. Negativity sells, arguing sells, bickering sells. I don't want to be a part of any of that. I want to tell men that they deserve to be valued. I want to tell men that, having boundaries doesn't make you toxic. It makes you, that's what a real man is supposed to have. He's supposed to have boundaries. He's supposed to love himself. He's supposed to respect himself before he's uplifting anybody. Don't let any woman or anybody in this world tell you you're not enough when you're putting forth the effort. So many men, even just so many men, there's men out there working 60, 70 hours a week, but just because they don't make six figures, they don't make seven figures, they're told it's not enough, and I'm sick of it. I'm sick of just men not being valued. We are more than just a paycheck. As men, we are more than, we're more than here on this earth to just be quiet and pay for things. We have opinions, we have love, we have a lot to offer upstairs in our minds. We have hearts, we care, and it's all being trampled on and devalued by a society that just says men are, if we can't just spoil a woman rotten and, buy her $5,000 bags and luxury cars and put her in a mansion, then we're not a real man. That's not what a real man is. A real man is a man who loves hard. A real man is a man who he loves hard, and he loves deep. He's a real man doesn't just love his children. He's in love with his children. Like, he's in love with the idea that they will grow up and be better people if he's in their life. Fathers are important. Fathers are not child support. I didn't say child support is important. A check, I'm not, all kids deserve to be supported. I'm not saying, if you're not with the woman and she shouldn't get child support. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying so many times nowadays, Sexy Chocolate, hey, how you doing? Thank you for joining along with everybody else. Men have value outside of the amount of money we can send a woman. People call me bitter. even earlier today for just saying men, we deserve to be able to have demands, have boundaries, you know. We deserve to have love and appreciation, you know. Men are so void of appreciation these days unless we're literally uh handing over money. It's all monetary, you know. Does anybody care if a man is kind? You got all these women with kids by other men on these dating apps, and not one thing in their bio says the man must be kind or good with children or loving or compassionate. No, it's what can you do for me? What can you pay for me? Pay this, pay this, pay this, pay this, pay this, pay this, pay this. If you can't pay this, swipe whatever way. I ain't on those sites. I don't know which way swipe is for pass, but you know, it's swipe if you can't pay for my whole life. Those are leeches, those are beggars, those are bums. Those are people who have no manners, they're rude. It's crass to even think somebody should pay your bills that you don't know. Like, if you're sitting there looking for love for a man that can pay all your bills, you're not looking for love. You're not looking for companionship. You're not looking for leadership. Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm here for. Like I said, we can't, Brandon. We don't need to suppress these issues. You're right. These are real issues. Men aren't just something to pay for things for women and our children. Like, do you even care what type of, like, they want men to pay for it? Do you even care what type of person this man is, other than that he can pay for things? Because it doesn't seem like y'all care about anything about his moral fiber, his morals, what kind of person he is, just what can he pay for. Say, Ashley, how you doing? I didn't say hi to you or see you. I'm sorry. I've just been on my rant. I don't know how to build a house from the ground up. No, I don't. But I know how to do, I have tools. I know how to build. I know how to repair. Absolutely. You know, I don't see, it says they don't exactly want a foundation for a family. They do the easy thing. You know, Ashley, I think I lost you. I didn't know exactly what side you were talking about here, but you did, I do think men should be able to build and do manly things and protect and provide. Absolutely. So I don't think we're too far off base. We need mans from the past because they know, you know, I think in the past, you know, if you want to talk about the past, Ashley, then, you know, then you must be for stronger gender roles, because I'm all for manly men being manly men, and I'm all for and men being protectors and providers and taking care of things. But that means you must also be for women cleaning and cooking and making sure there's a meal for her man and taking care of her man, and that man having a clean house to come home to, and that man not being talked to with a disrespectful tone. You know, there's I think there's a lot of things that are great from the past, but that's a two-way street. We definitely need men that can build things and work with their hands, and more stand-up men nowadays. Absolutely. I fully agree with that, but we also need more soft, less masculine, less demanding, more subtle, nurturing women too. There's nothing wrong with being submissive to a man who's holding it down and taking care of things. You know, so I agree with y'all both, but The past is, if you want to talk about the past, let's, we don't need women these days. Do they know how to sew? Do they do dishes by hand? You know, there's a lot of domestic things that are very, very lost that women used to be able to do too. It's not just all men are men from the past are better or stronger or anything. You know, they had women that actually had their back. Women that played their role, and women that let a man lead. If a man even says, I'm going to lead now, and a woman gets all snap in her neck, and I don't want to, I'm not being submissive to no man, I'm not being a maid to no man. What if he's a good man? What if he's a good, hard working, hold it down, take good care of the kids man? He doesn't deserve to be cooked for, cleaned for, submissive for, cleaned up after? I think he does. If he's paying for everything, holding it down, taking care of his family, helping with the kids, absolutely, good men need to be treated good too. Now, you say some men complain stuff for why they have to pay the rent. I don't think they should complain about paying the rent at the place they live at, but I think there's a big problem when women ask men that have no business paying their rent at a place that they don't live. That's sucker, simp, weak man energy. No man should be obligated or should be paying a woman's rent if he doesn't live there. If he lives there and he's paying the rent, well, that's cool. I hope she's at least keeping that mother effer clean. I hope if he's paying the rent, he's coming home to a hot plate. I hope he gets his back rubbed every now and then. Ashley said people don't want to work hard anymore. They want easy and still complain. I think you're 1,000% correct, Ashley. I think that's exactly why we have so many women with a list of things men have to pay in their bios of dating apps. I think that's why women are demanding men pay and give them money just to even go out. Just to even go out on dates with them. I think that's all taking the easy way out. But I think, men paying for these type of women because they know they'll get time and affection or loving or whatever if they pay, that's easy and taking the easy way out too. I'm not saying one's any better than others, but I think you're 1,000% correct. Everybody's trying to take the easy way out. And I'm just saying a lot of times it ends up with people getting hurt, and I'm not for that. I don't want to see the women get hurt, but I don't want to see men get hurt too. And everybody cries when the woman gets hurt. Everybody is sensitive. A woman gets hurt, she's got 5 guys that are run to wipe her tears. People listen. When a man gets hurt, we just hear buck up, man up. That's it. That's it. That's it. Like I said, women have women's shelters, women homes, family women's shelters. The only, shelter for just men is jail. Men need to fall on really bad, hard times. Their shelter is jail or prison. That's the only government assisted shelter for men. It's not always fair for men. Men need help too sometimes. Men need encouragement, and that's what I'm here for. I'm encourage men to be the best versions of themselves. Sometimes, a lot of times, avoiding a lot of the BS is just, a lot of the BS can be avoided by paying attention to red flags. And there's a lot of red flags, and if you don't see a woman who's got her list of expenses in her bio as a red flag, or she thinks it's appropriate to ask you to be sending her money through these cash sending apps, when she hardly knows you, that's not appropriate. It's just rude. It's just rude. It's rude to to make assumptions that any adult should be paying your way. Men don't get away with that. Men can't just be like, oh, I need a woman who's going to pay for everything for me and I got to do nothing. Men can't get away from that. Can't get away with that. But I thought these women wanted equality. But no man in his right mind can go around putting in his dating bio, I need a woman who she needs to pay my rent, she needs to pay my car note, she needs to pay for my clothes, she needs to give me a spending allowance. No man can put that in his dating bio and be taken seriously. They just can't. They shouldn't want to. And neither should a woman who values herself. It's a two-way street. It's a two-way street. It needs to be a two-way street. Men just will go with things like Brandon said a while back. We'll just thank you for the follow. Thank you for any listens. Thank you so much for anybody who's listened and corresponded and paid attention, or, just any little seed of positivity or hope or respect or anything. Sketch 84, thank you so much. Good morning, so much. Much love to yourself. Thank you for any likes, follows. It's just such a blessing to have people, even the people who didn't like, even the people who didn't follow, thank you just for even tuning in and listening, because that's means the world to me, that people would take what I have to say and be like, thank you, this is what I need to hear. And the people who have told me that today, it's just, I'm not the most emotional guy, but, I'm overcome with gratitude for everybody who has just listened and even took the time out of their day to just listen and correspond. And just thank you all. Thank you all so much. I'm seriously overwhelmed. I just, I got to get off here. I've been on here for a while now. I'll talk for about 5 more minutes. And I'm going to just use that word appreciation and just run with that, because there's nothing wrong, with appreciating a good man. I'm going to repeat that. I'm not asking you ladies to appreciate some bum, some dude who plays PlayStation all day, or some guy who just mooching off you. Matter of fact, you need to get them type of men out your life, and fast, because the longer you keep them in your life, they're going to make it harder or take up time, or you'll be more used up for the good dude, the man you really want. Get them dudes out your life. Good morning to you, Wiley Scott. Franco, thank you for joining. Asia, thank you for joining. Thank you all for joining. So, it's all about self-respect. I'm not asking women to, be respectful or be appreciative to a man who doesn't deserve it. I'm talking about the men who deserve it. Because there's a lot of men out there who deserve it. There's a lot of men who really, truly love their kids and would do anything for their kids. Ain't that right, Brandon? There's a lot of people, there's a lot of good men out there who are being devalued because, they're not a lottery win for a baby's mother, a girlfriend, a wife, or just a woman that they just meet. Men aren't put on this earth to just sit there and pay for everything, and then that's their whole worth is tied up into that. Some of the best things in life, the absolute best things in life, are free. I like material things. I like nice things. I like nice cars. I like nice houses too. But like, I got a 3-year-old daughter, and her putting her little arms around me and telling me she loves me, that's priceless. That doesn't cost anything. We need to start appreciating what's around us and what we have and what we can control. Like I said, my little daughters, I got a 3-year-old and a 2-year-old daughter. And, when they come up to me or I'm walking out the door and they have to give me a hug or they just, I love you, Dada. Like, it's free, but it's the only thing that matters. At those moments when real stuff is going on. Let me hold on. I didn't see your name, but any advice to get over a 4-year relationship? He stopped loving me out of the blue, and you're only 19, and he stopped loving you out the blue. I don't know. Can somebody help me block this person? I don't know how to do that yet or not, but I don't know. It's just rude. We're really trying to keep it positive. I don't like all these trolling spam. But I want to respond to the lady who said she's 19 and he just broke up with you. I'm going to say you are way too young to be worried about him. You got your life ahead of you. You need to just be worried about yourself. Obviously he didn't appreciate you. He didn't value you. So, just be about yourself. Work on you. He's going to figure out what he lost. So, oh man. Does anybody got any advice how to report this person or ban somebody? I'm sorry, this is only my second time doing okay, hold down his name. Thank you. Okay. Thank you so much for the person who gave advice without clowning me for needing it. This is what our group is for. People helping people. That's exactly. I asked for some simple advice. Somebody told me. We're helping each other in here. This is a room of helping each other. We're uplifting each other. We're letting each other know that we deserve self-respect. We deserve to respect ourselves. If I can do anything to just, if somebody asks me something, anything little simple I could do, and I could just mention it by being like, hey, hold down their name. That's what I had to do. I learned something today. This is only my second time being on here, so forgive my ignorance to the technology. But thank you so much for the person who taught me how to do that. I'll obviously never forget that as it's needed. So thank you for the help, and thank you for everybody who's listened. But I did want to end on appreciation. Appreciation. Men, appreciate yourself. Women, don't be afraid to appreciate a good man. That doesn't make you weak as a woman to be submissive and do nice things for a man who deserves it. I hear all this low-key join, Zoe join. I appreciate everybody who's joined. There's nothing wrong, ladies, with spoiling, taking care of, being submissive, being nice to, cooking for, grabbing your man a beer out the fridge while he's watching the game. There's nothing wrong with any of that. There's nothing wrong with any of it. If it's a man who's good to you and he holds it down and he's a good, solid man, he might not even have his money right yet, but he got a plan. And you believe in his plan. And to believe in his plan, you need to support him and listen to him and cooperate. Because, uh, women, if you get behind a man and you support him while he's accomplishing his goals, just the trust and the love. Like, I could never leave my wife. I could never leave my wife. And you know why? Because she loved me when I didn't have nothing. Now I have a little something. I got something now, but how could I ever find somebody again now who loved me when I had nothing? My wife treated me like a king and believed in my vision and my plan when I ain't have nothing. So I'd be a complete idiot to leave her for some girl who likes me now when I have a little something and has her hand out. I'll never trust another woman in my life besides the woman that was there with me during the struggle. Women, if you're there during the struggle with a man, a good man, he gonna reward you when he starts seeing his goals and he starts seeing his goals come to fruition and his seeds start blossoming. If you were there for the struggle, you are much more likely to be treated with respect and to be, to share in the spoils of the struggle. Men are wising up. We don't want these leeches to latch onto us when we already got something. How could you blame us? You know? Well, we'll never say never, Brennan. And temptation is a mother effer. That's for sure. But, we can try. I'm not asking for perfection from anybody. I just ask we try to be good to each other. Try to respect each other. You might not want to be with that person anymore. Don't be with them. Respect them and respect yourself enough to step away. Or they don't align with your morals, or they don't, all of a sudden y'all are bickering more than y'all are loving each other. Love each other enough to step away. Men can do bad by themselves. They can also do great by themselves. Yeah, love is beautiful. Love is beautiful. Like, shoot. That's why I encourage women. Brandon, you said love is beautiful. I encourage women to stop passing up on love, stop passing up on a good man, a man who actually likes them, a man who actually, will come home and is a hard worker, but they're passing up on these men because they're not a lottery ticket. They don't make enough. They don't make 500,000 a year. They don't make 6 figures. They don't make 7 figures. So they're passing up on men that, companionship is being so devalued. And then women start to get a little older. They start creeping into their late 30s, into their 40s, and they're like, dang, I really wish I would have had that companionship. Nobody likes to spend. I don't care if you're independent, you have a career, you make your own money. Nobody wants to come home and watch TV by themselves and order food delivery by themselves every night. Life is meant to be shared. Vacations are better shared with other people. TV is better shared with other people. Chill time is chill. Everything is better if you have somebody to share it with. But only if it's the right person. Not, life is better you just being by yourself and working on you if it's somebody who's just using you. And so many men are settling. And I encourage men not to settle. They're settling for being used. That's no way to live, fellas. That's no way to live. Brandon, you're such a young man. You said what you do to come home to somebody who makes you feel loved and respected. And I'm going to tell you, it is the best feeling. I don't even think I truly loved myself until I had somebody who was like loved and respected me, which is sad because I should have loved myself first. But once I just didn't grow up as a child with love in my life. So when I had somebody who really did believe in me and love in me, I saw my full potential and started reaching for my full potential. And that's sad. That's one of the reasons I'm encouraging men. You need to reach for, you don't need a woman to validate your potential. You don't need a woman to validate your potential. You know, you need to work on you first and foremost. Yeah, you know, absolutely. Respect should come first, and respect and appreciation is such a, it's just a lost thing by both sexes. Like I've said a couple times now, it's just so sad. Everything's become a transaction. Women are taught and they're now measuring love and how much a man can spend, and men are literally just getting used to, love is being used. You don't see me as a person, see who I am, see my values, see my morals, see my moral fiber. You just see what I can do for you, how much I can spend on you, what I can buy you, where I can take you. And it's just becoming such a sad state of affairs for men and women. LaBrenda, thank you so much for the roses. I appreciate you. I love you, sweetheart. Thank you for listening. Thank you for joining. Thank you for anybody who followed, anybody who liked. But yeah, it's becoming just such a sad state of affairs for men and women. Everything is just, it's void of just love and companionship. It's all just a transaction. It's all just monetary. And I'm still a big believer in love and respect and appreciation. If I said it before, you see a woman and she finds somebody, and it's a guy's treating her right, you see her start skipping through life, walking on clouds. She got a little more pep in her step. You can literally see her floating on cloud 9 when a woman's getting some good loving and she found somebody good. Her whole demeanor changes. Happiness, love is beautiful. Love can be the compatibility between two people when they put down all the facades of how men trying to look like they have more than they have. Women with their hand out. Frank, what's up? Frank Dreamer, I like that name. What's up, brother? Brandon, how you doing? Roxy, how you doing? Thank you for joining. I appreciate all the joins, the likes, the follows, all that good stuff. I'm just blown away by how much love I've been getting and how many people have been listening and saying they appreciate things I've been saying. And I appreciate the people who have been corresponding and asking good questions and actually speaking to somebody that they don't even know. And people been, people been, men, I'm gonna keep it real, men been, putting their heart on the line in a place where, let's just keep it real, they could put their heart out on the line and a bunch of people can start attacking them. So, women, it's a lot easier, I'm sorry, it's just society for y'all to put your heart out on the line. So I just want to show another shout out of respect to my men out there who, Brandon, I'm so glad to hear that, bro. He says he's doing a lot better than he was at first, and I could just tell it in your mood. I could tell it in the way you've been talking to other people who are on here. You've been corresponding. I'm gonna keep it real with you. You were scaring me. You were scaring me, my brother, when you first joined. And now you sound like you're practically giving advice with me, dog. I appreciate it, man. I love I love to see it. I love to see it. You're sitting here, you've been listening to everything I say. You've been corresponding. You've been talking with other people. I can see you building up. I knew it was in you. We just get into them dark places, man. Like I said, you're always, I hope you messaged me. I'm gonna message you back. I've been kind of on here for a long time, so I need to go take a little break and give me some sleep when I'm done here. But now, Brandon, you the man, bro. For real. We gonna talk. We're gonna be friends for real. Because I appreciate you, and you've been in here for a long time, and you've actually been listening. You've been listening, and we gonna be cool, bro. What's my pronouns? I don't know. I'm too old to even know what that means exactly. So I guess it's man, he. So I'm not trying to offend anybody. I just don't know what all that stuff is really about. No, I don't watch the UFC. All right, love you too, big dog. Thank you for everybody who joined. I just want to say, not only do men need to be able to not depend on anybody, you need to be, allow yourself. Let me rephrase that. Men, you need to allow yourself to accept love, to accept respect. And I'm not saying it comes from everywhere around the corner, but sometimes it can be so rare to men that we don't even, yo, how you doing? Ron Miller, how you doing? Thank you for the join. Thank you for listening. It can be so rare to men to get appreciation, to get love, for people to actually want to get to know them for who they are. It can come across as disingenuous to us when somebody actually comes at us like that. And that's very sad, but we do deserve respect. We do deserve, there's a lot of good fathers out there. There's a lot of hard workers out there. There's a lot of good men who are getting passed up because for just because they don't meet a financial measurement, or women's friends are telling them they're not enough or something like that. Brandon, you said the unknown is terrifying. Absolutely. It's actually the root of almost all fears. When people know, they're not really that scared, but the unknown, that's what makes death so scary. But, we just got to keep our chin up and plow ahead. Keep that chin up, keep our eyes wide, and go through that dark tunnel. Because I know a lot of men are in a place of darkness. You got to go through that dark tunnel, but you just got to keep going forward. Even if you don't see the light at the end of the tunnel, you just got to keep going, keep going. Dr. Martin Luther King said, you don't have to see the top of the staircase. Just take the first step. It's wise words. You don't have to see the end of your goals right now. You just need to know you're moving in the right direction towards them. Take that first step, then take that next step, and it becomes easier, and it becomes easier. And then lo and behold, you've been moving in the right direction so long, God damn it, you can see the top of the staircase. You can see the light at the end of the tunnel. You can see your goals, and that's going to make you even start plowing forward even harder. That's going to make you start working even harder because you see that your goals are getting you somewhere. But you don't have to see the light at the end of the tunnel. You don't have to see the top of the staircase. All you have to do is start. Take that first step in the right direction. You know in your head, if you're, as a man, if you're going in the right direction. You know as a woman. Thank you for the joins. Thank you for the follows. Thank you for anybody who followed, liked. Thank you. Once again, I'm so overwhelmed by the people who are listening and paying attention and who have corresponded. Thank you. You do not have to see the end when you start. Just move in the right direction. And I see so many men trying to move in the proper direction, the right direction. A lot of men, I'm not talking about any specific race. I'm not talking about any specific religion. Men, period, as a bunch, we'll be so quick to be labeled deadbeats or bums or this or that. People don't even allow men time to get their life together. Men don't hit their financial stride till their mid-40s. That's just a fact. We're telling these young men in their 20s and in their young 30s that they're not enough because they don't have this or that, or they can't do this. Most men in their young 30s and 20s, sorry, they're not out buying mansions and Rolls Royces and yachts, and they don't live on vacation. Men in their 20s and their young 30s, they still figuring it out. But does that man, is he moving in the right direction? No man's supposed to have it all figured out by 30, by 25. Man's brain, adult's brain doesn't even fully develop until 25. We got these men who think that are 22 thinking it's their obligation to work to send some woman some money via some cash sending apps. And so many men, your teacher told you that in middle school, smart teacher. But, you know, so many men are just being taught that, you know, their effort is not enough, and it's driving men into depression. It's driving men into drugs, alcoholism. It's driving men into just, you know, just wanting to give up because, you know, we're working our tails off and being told it's never enough. It's never enough. You know, you think it's rough. Women are, you know, gonna leave you. We got women leaving men that make 50 million a year for the man who makes 60. We got women who are leaving men who take great care of them and their kids just because they bored. They say the man works too much. You know, like, did you hear what I said? They're saying that the man is boring and she doesn't get enough attention, and she's using it as justification to leave him because he's working too much to fund her lifestyle and their life. But he's not exciting anymore, you know. He ain't, you know. It's sad. It's so sad to me. You know, so many good men are getting left in the dust by women that don't have nothing to offer, and these women aren't finding anybody better, or they might find that person that's exciting for a little bit, and then they're lonely, he's lonely. Like, unrealistic expectations are just destroying relationships. Nobody ever being enough. It's just destroying relationships. You know, is there ever going to be a point when we're like, dang, you know, where's all, you know, it's a lost art for people to be like, this person is great. This person is good. Look at all, start looking at the glass half full. Look at all the great things that person does for you. Now, women, I'm never advising you to stay with a man who puts his hands on you or is a threat to you or is just a bum mooching off you. Absolutely not. I'm talking about the good men out there. Yeah, you're right. The cat emoji, she wants to be a housewife and not even work. You know? Too. You said the girl I'm talking to right now, she wants me to work because I'm the man of the house. Well, can't really blame her for that one. You know? There's nothing wrong with that. What is she doing though too? I hope she's doing something too to justify her being able to ask you to do anything. What's she doing? If you know, it's confusing times. It's confusing times. I don't blame you. I'm confused. One of the reasons I'm on here talking is because I'm confused. I'm confused why I don't know how it's even people are getting away with just, or women are even getting away with having their hand out and asking men for large sums of money to pay their bills and just asking them for money, period. They don't even know them. That's craziness. Like, that's craziness. It's the audacity. But everybody, I need to take a break. I need to use the restroom. I need to get me a little nap since I started pretty late at night. So, like I said, I love everybody that listen. Thank you for the follows. Thank you for the joins. Thank you for the listenings. Brandon, I'm going to hit you up as soon as I wake up, bro. It was good talking to you. Nah, from the bottom of my heart, thank you. God bless you, bro. The cat emoji. Thank you all. You know, I'm gonna try to be on here every day, or at least every day you follow my page. You know, I'll try to give some updates of when I'll be on here, but just thank you everybody for listening. Thank you everybody who's attention. You have overwhelmed my heart. You have literally overwhelmed my heart with listening and corresponding and taking any little seed of advice I've given, and I appreciate it. And I'm learning a lot from y'all too. I don't just think I'm sitting here like I'm preaching down on people. I'm learning just as much from the people who are talking to me, because these are real people and they're laying out their feelings and their heart on the line. And I appreciate that. And I learn a lot from that. And it makes me be a bigger man to know that it's okay to do that. So I appreciate y'all ladies who are in here. I appreciate the ladies, the good women who agree that men do deserve appreciation and love if they're a good, hardworking man.